Today on the Criss Cross Cinema Podcast, two titans battle after 6 decades apart in 1962's King Kong vs. Godzilla and 2021's Godzilla vs. Kong on the Criss Cross Cinema Podcast.
Two fellows meet accidentally, like you and me. No connection between them at all, never saw each other before. They swap murders. Criss Cross.
Wilson! I'm sorry, Wilson! A day may come when the courage of men fails, but it is not this day.
You gotta keep breathing, because tomorrow the sun will rise. Who knows what the tide could bring?
Hello and welcome to the Criss Cross Cinema Podcast, where we crisscross cinema history to find connections that escape the casual eye. Try and spot them along with us. Today, two titans rematch 60 years apart in our two-film showdown, King Kong vs. Godzilla vs. Kong.
A lot of verses in there.
Yes. It's like a church hymn. Hi, I'm Aaron Wilson, a newbie Godzilla fan learning from the master.
And I'm Mark Klobas, a longtime Godzilla fan who has just rediscovered something that he never knew existed.
Hi, my name is Karina, a King Kong and Godzilla fan, admiring and noticing just like familiar sounds within their roars. It's a curse being a sound, just like a sound person
lions
now.
Lions and such.
Yeah, lions, exactly. Literally what I had in my mind. Yeah.
Cool. If you'd like to get access to bonus features and deleted clips from Criss Cross and our sister show, Facets of Story, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/transcendentertainment. That's TRANSCEND Entertainment. On today's episode, as always, we'll review our two films, and at the end, we go crisscross to compare and contrast them both. But first, Mark, what media has trumped through your view?
Well, not a whole lot. I think the only thing that really stands out is I've been watching just watched the most recent episode of Masters of the Air, and I'm really enjoying it. It's very dramatic. It's very nicely done. It's a little bit different than you might expect given the premise. They really kind of do a lot to make it not just about another, episode where they're in a plane flying over Germany, dropping stuff out of it. They're varying it up, and it really is refreshing. How about you, Karina?
I've been watching a couple stuff. I think the last film I've seen in theaters was the Zone of Interest.
I have heard so many good things about that. Does it live up to the hype?
It is objectively a very beautiful film. Incredibly thought-provoking, unsettling. I don't know if you know anything about it, but you follow a Nazi family. They're the center of the story. They're the main characters. You follow a Nazi family. This Nazi leader just got promoted, so they got him a house next to Auschwitz, or next to, I believe it is Auschwitz, next to one of the concentration camps. So he oversees the concentration camps. He has his family there, his babies. He's got his big house with a garden and pool. So this man is living our version of the American dream. When you think of the American dream, dogs.
Some serious contrast.
No,
yeah.
And seriously. And then at some point in the film, he gets told that he is being moved to oversee another concentration camp. And so he's having a lot of the conflict is this dad or this husband, just trying to balance his work life and his family. But mind you, these are Nazis.
Yeah.
They're Nazis. And you kind of, I hate to say this, but you kind of sympathize with him, because this is what a lot of people go through. It's just job conflict, work related conflict, oh, they're moving me to Pennsylvania. The company's moving to Pennsylvania, babe. We got to move. But we just got here. I love this house. I know, babe, but I'm getting a big promotion. We could have a better house. I promise. They're making promises to each other. But they're Nazis. And so now you're questioning your morals. You're like, am I really sympathizing with the Nazi right now? And that's the power of that movie. But I think its main punch is that the entire time you're watching this family who at this point in the film, actually at no point during the film, they're not doing anything Like, you don't see them doing anything wrong. You just see them existing and living and loving each other. But in the background, you never stop seeing like the smoke, the fire burning, the walls of the concentration camp. In their house as well, there's like prisoners walking in and out of their house who they're using as maids and stuff like that. There's always like a sense of eeriness. You're never too comfortable with these characters because you're again reminded these are Nazis.
Yeah.
But also I might be speaking for myself here. It's hard to hate them because the film decides to just show you like the family side, just the humanity of it. By humanity, I really mean just like you're watching a family. You're just watching a family try to balance, personal life and work life. It brings up a lot of ideas like people are people, but why are these people treated as people but not the Jews, not the prisoners, you know what I mean? Why do we have to care about sometimes your problems are not as big as like other people's problems. Just, it's a concentration. There's people dying in there, but
they're Nazis.
It's a heavy film. It's intense. It's a slow burn type of film. I've only seen one trailer. I didn't really look into it before I saw it. I try to, during like Oscar season, I try to see every like Oscar contender as best I can before the ceremony. And this one is the one that has been getting like talks that it could potentially win because it has that factor. I think everybody should see it. It's a beautiful film. It can drag a little bit, but that's kind of like its strength too.
It's interesting the way you describe it, because it makes me think about another major contender this year, which is Oppenheimer, which got a lot of criticism when it came out for not incorporating that the perspective of the victims of what was happening. You had a lot of criticism about the fact that the Native Americans in the area and how they were treated, that was glossed over. You have the suffering of the Japanese addressed very indirectly, and how it seems that Zone of Interest has really been able to overcome that, because I don't know too much about the movie. I have been reading a little bit about it, and I've not seen anywhere near the level of criticism of it that Oppenheimer received, and yet Oppenheimer is the one that's raking in all the awards.
Yeah, that movie is a spectacle, Oppenheimer, for sure. But I really recommend you watch The Zone of Interest. It's a powerful movie. Steven Spielberg recently said he's like, it's the best like Holocaust movie since my film. That's what he said. And it's true. It's true. I didn't think we needed another. I'm not gonna lie to you. When I walked into the movie, I was like, do we need another like Holocaust, like concentration camp movie? Mm-hmm. Like I'm like going into it, I was like, I know this is gonna be heavy. But you know what? I'm here. But no, we do. There's the Holocaust, that point in history that we want to forget, but we just can't, because you can take so much perspective from it, different perspectives from it. And this film just proves we can, like, there's still new angles to talk about from that tragic era in history. So Zone of Interest, that one was heavy. Poor Things. So I don't want to keep going. I'm always watching movies. Yeah. But what about you, Aaron?
I was just watching The Apartment this morning when I was waiting for you guys.
Really?
I was actually doing research on it, and it bumped my other one, which I won't tell you what it is because I might use it for another episode. It's great, like 1960s classic where the craft was just peak. I mean, it's Billy Wilder, so you know it's going to be good. And for anybody who doesn't know what it is, I'm going to list a couple actors that you probably don't know either. Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine are
Fred
the two
McMurray.
leads.
Yeah,
Fred McMurray as the boss. And I'm going to get into it further in the episode because that's actually why I was researching it. But just go watch it. It's a great classic.
I must confess, I'm really looking forward to hearing the connection between The Apartment by Billy Wilder and King Kong versus Godzilla.
Yeah, right.
By Ishiro
What a
Honda.
transition.
There's our tease for the episode. Just like always, we'll be diving deep. Fair warning, here there be spoilers. And now our review of King Kong versus Godzilla, 1962.
So, Karina, you said you were a fan of King Kong versus Godzilla. When did you first watch it?
So not necessarily King Kong versus Godzilla. I'm a huge like King Kong fan, actually. Peter Jackson's King Kong from 2005 is one of my favorite films of all time.
I feel that's underappreciated.
Oh my gosh, not enough people are talking about it. It's a gorgeous film. It's visual effects, art eons better than what you'll find today in big budgeted movies. Mm-hmm. It's crazy. It's crazy how magnificent this film is. It's on like technical aspects and even on story aspects, just its visual effects, its sound, its cinematography, its production design. The movie looks so good because they took their time with the details. I watched it when I was a kid and it's stuck with me since then. It's actually made me love movies because of all like the meticulous effort that goes into it. The movie's 3.5 hours long, so you'll get your fill too when you watch it.
Oh, yeah.
My goodness. I didn't notice that. Okay.
It's long but you don't want it to end. And you feel the journey. Like it doesn't drag, like you feel it. You feel I say that respectfully. Like you get your money's worth. It's time well spent. I'm a huge fan of the 2005 King Kong. And since then I tried to like watch other King Kong media. I watched Kong Skull Island and I thought that one was pretty good. I haven't seen a terrible King Kong film yet. But we'll talk about that later.
I've seen one or two that I think might be contenders for that title, but we can get to that when we get to that.
We'll get there.
And for me, I was a longtime fan of Godzilla films. It's interesting because you're coming at this from the standpoint of King Kong. For me, I came at it through Godzilla. There was back before we had DVDs or even VHS. We had we had to watch TV, on the channel, and there was a local show Saturday mornings 10:30 that would always show like horror science fiction movies, and the day that whenever it was going to be a Godzilla movie, my weekend was made, and I loved, and they would all show the Showa era, which is the Godzilla movies from the very original to Terror of Mechagodzilla, and which is right before they took about a decade hiatus. And I would watch King Kong versus Godzilla, and I just had such a low opinion of it. It was just nowhere near as good. And what's fascinating, and we're going to get into this, I think, is just how badly it was, I don't want to say mutilated, but it was altered to suit what were believed to be American sensibilities circa 1963. And so my opinion of it was so low going into this. I still wanted to do the comparison, but I went into it thinking that, it's going to be, I went into it, you're really curious to see how it was going to look after several decades. But it was also fascinating because we have nowadays an opportunity, an advantage that we didn't have back when I was watching, which is that you can now watch the Japanese version. And I made it a point to seek out the Japanese version and that was for me in the sense, it was like watching the movie for the first time. And that in itself was such a fascinating experience. So I'm in this weird condition where I've both had this familiarity with King Kong versus Godzilla, but at the same time, it was also a new experience.
Yeah.
And that was really awesome.
So I'm probably the the lightweight in this fight, being smashed between King Kong and Godzilla over here. I was going to be like, fight when you said Godzilla. But yeah, I love Godzilla. I was first introduced to it in the 1998 movie. Don't at me. But I love the 2014 one, just the sense of scale and amazing stuff to it. The story's not that great, but just Gareth Edwards is just amazing with his visuals. And I think they haven't really lived up to it in the film since. But it'd be great if they brought him back. Actually, I just saw that he got hired for the next Jurassic Park. He's going to knock that out of the park. No pun intended. I hope they get good script writers, because the script writing on the last three were not good.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my salty take for the day. But yeah, I'm the newbie on the list, but I thoroughly enjoyed both these, especially the 1962 one. Mm-hmm. So,
shall we get into it?
Yeah.
One of the things I love about the 1962 version, and this is one of the substantive differences with, not substantive, but it's one of the key differences with the 1963 version, is the opening. The visual is the same, but the framing of it is different. Because you open the movie, the 1962 version, and you have this cheesy image of a revolving Earth accompanied by an ominous voiceover. And I have to say, I'm watching it for the first time in decades. I'm thinking to myself, was the special effects budget really that small? Yeah. But no, you find out that this is not a special effect where they're doing this, ominous voiceover like you saw in those movies. It is instead a TV show about science, and you get a Japanese version of Bill Nye talking about rising sea levels. Turns out his show is hosted or sponsored by Pacific Pharmaceuticals, and this gets into this really interesting aspect of it, which is how the film was on one level a satirical commentary by Honda and the scriptwriters of Japan's obsession with television during the time.
Right.
And that's something that you watch the American version, it's just not in there. I went back and rewatched the American version, and it's just so fascinating to see how they take the same scenes and the voiceovers are just have no relation at all to what they're actually saying.
I got a very Jurassic World vibe, like the first Jurassic World, where they do a very meta thing where it's like, we're advertising our new dinosaur and it's the best product, and at the same time, this is what's happening with the movie. I really didn't like that storytelling wise, because it was just message for message's sake, and it really had nothing to do with the characters. But I got that kind of a vibe with what they were doing with I really did not understand it. So I'm glad you just explained it. I'm like, okay, this is they do a TV show, but they're also a pharmaceutical company, and now they're going on an expedition to, I don't know what's happening. And
it's entirely for ratings. That's where you get the character of Mr. Taco, who's the villain of the movie. And and the guy who plays him, I don't know his name, but he was this longtime comic actor. He's been equated with, he's like the Japanese version of Charlie Chaplin, maybe not in terms of impact, but in terms of his ability to do both, humor and pathos. And he's definitely, and again, this is something that you don't get as much of, because they really diminished his role in the American version. But you get the sense that he is kind of this over the top guy. I mean, you get a lot of, there's a lot of, and I don't know.
There's so many gags in this movie.
Exactly. There's so many gags. There's so many facial gags. He's tearing out his hair, and he spends so much time complaining about how his rival company was undercutting him. Mr. Miracle is boring. The rival company, they're featuring this UN expedition, and then you cut to this U.S. submarine, the Seahawk, which is exploring the Arctic with a team of UN scientists. And I just have to say,
oh my goodness, the acting.
The acting is off.
Is that what? Okay.
I actually can overlook the acting because I fixate on the white gloves. I'm just watching this, and
I didn't even notice that.
For me, I just cannot not notice it, because you're seeing the crew. The captain has these white gloves on. The guys. the crew members during the ship has white gloves on, and I'm thinking, I guess that when they're done piloting the ship, they serve
Gone to a Mickey
tea or
Mouse
something.
convention.
Apparently, it's a cultural thing, but it kind of gets to how it is almost kind of like an afterthought. We're going to do the American part of it. But you're right. The acting is awful.
I think the
line
problem
delivery's horrible.
was the language barrier. Like, it's easy to tell. Like, for us, it would be like directing somebody in Japanese. You have no idea if they're acting well or not because you don't even understand the language. But
and that's interesting because when you watch the American version, you watch the new footage they made for that. They did about 3 days of production, and the acting on that is better. I mean, there are lots of other issues with it, but the acting is so much better. And they redid they dubbed the voices for the Americans, and the dubbing in the American version is better than the acting.
That's sad.
Sad.
It does not speak well of those actors.
It's like one of the two things where the American version is actually better. But it's just so flat. But it works in terms of just kind of advancing the story. But then you cut back to this TV studio, and that's where we meet the friends Sakura and Fura, and they're discussing this impending big opportunity. And they meet with Mr. Taco, who talks about there's these miraculous berries which are only found on this place called Faroe Island in the South Pacific, and that there's also this mammoth evil spirit. And this is where we get Mr. Taco's plan. He is going to send them on a data finding expedition. He's going to investigate this mammoth evil spirit because he's hoping that this expedition will somehow eclipse the coverage by his rival of the Seahawks expedition. And then we get Sakura, who returns home, and he finds his sister Fumiko at his neighbor Kazuo's apartment producing dinner. And one of the things I find interesting about this, and this is something that we lose with time, is you watch this scene and you compare it to the previous Godzilla movies, and you really get a sense as to just how much has changed compared to what was. Because you watch the first two Godzilla movies, and I'll get into them a little bit later on, but the first two Godzilla movies are for one thing, they're black and white. This was one of the things that made King Kong vs. Godzilla stand out by comparison, was that it was the first, color Godzilla movie. But it was also that you're seeing a very different Japan. In 1954, when the first Godzilla came out, it was very much a Japan still recovering from World War II. The years of bombing, the blockade and so forth, then the occupation. This is a prosperous Japan where they could sit around arguing about the size of the steak on each other's plates, or they're just carrying around food, and they're wearing colorful fashions. This is a Japan that is very much prospering, happy. There you have Kazuo showing off the invention of the fiber that he's developed. This is Japan that's going places. It's Japan's back.
So would this be similar to like the 80s in the U.S. or?
It's like the U.S. maybe like the 1950s, in the sense that
Right, okay,
the
that's
war,
what I was going to say too.
the wars in our rearview mirror, where the future's bright. We all have to wear shades, type of thing. It's that kind of approach that's being shown off, and I think it's one of the reasons. It's one of the factors in why the movie is so tonally different than the first two Godzilla movies. And that's something we'll be getting into, I think, a little bit later on. But then we cut back to the Seahawk, and oh boy, the Seahawk's in trouble. Now, how exactly it ran into the iceberg, I can't quite figure that out. I don't know if maybe you picked up on...
It's the bad acting.
Well, not just bad acting, but it's kind of like, it's approaching the iceberg, and all of a sudden, somehow it's in the iceberg. And we don't see it like crashing in to drop on it, or I don't know what. But then we cut back to Sakomi and Furue, going to Faroe Island, and it's like the moment they get off the boat, they're captured by the most problematic natives this side of Gilligan's Island. And we could talk about how natives in Kong movies are never depicted very well, but this one is just really awful. Although I have to say, and this I think also gets to the tone, is that I love how as they're being captured, you could see the boat that has dropped them off. The sailors, they're still rowing away. I mean, these guys are like being captured, and these sailors are like, "Let's get the heck out of here." Yeah. Again,
the part I thought was funny was when they both appear in the safari outfits, and they're like, "Are we overdoing it?" And I'm like, "Yep."
Yeah, right.
But they assure themselves, no, they're not. So they get brought before the natives, and how do they win the natives over? Well, they're going to win them over with Japan's prosperity. They give them a transistor radio, and then they give them cigarettes, and that's where you're like, oh, here we are rooting the natives. We're going to give them lung cancer, and they're giving it to a kid.
They did. That part was so funny. And then like an older lady, which made it seem like it's his mom, like took it and she started smoking it.
Yeah, hey, don't hog that. I need a puff too. And again, this is so much of a lighter Godzilla movie than ones came before, where the native chief is warning them off, and Furoi begins to move away, and Sukomi stops him, and he declares, "No wonder our ratings are dropping." No, we got to embrace the challenge. But then there's a sudden lightning storm, and the natives begin genuflecting, and Sukomi and Furoi are kind of like, oh, those primitives. But then they hear the roar, and
and that wall is really cool, or that I guess fence or whatever you
Screen.
call that. Yeah, like it goes all the way to the top of the cliffs, and it's okay. So the wall is miniature, but behind it, I'm sure, is a matte painting.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
So then we cut to Kazuo, who's on an expedition of his own. For some reason, they have to go to sea to test this fiber. Only the freighter has to return because the Seahawk is gone missing. So then we cut to an American helicopter that is going over the Arctic and looking for the sub. And they see, first they see a yellow dye in the water, and then they're flying over, and the iceberg is kind of shifting, and who pops out? But Godzilla, and it's like,
it's so fun.
Oh, Godzilla! They're freaking out, and then you cut to a scene where Godzilla attacks a military base, and this became easily one of my all-time favorite Godzilla attacks scenes.
Oh yeah, anytime there's miniatures and those miniature tanks burning and stuff.
Oh
and
yeah,
just smashing up all the buildings in the base.
Yeah, because I mean, Godzilla's approaching the base, and they're just they're pouring everything out there. You see cannons firing, see missiles going, see all the tanks coming out from some underground base, and they're all lining up and firing. And it's so funny. Godzilla torches one, and then they all go scurrying back into the base to recover, which is, again, you watch the first two Godzilla movies, I mean, the military just sits there and they're doing their best and until Godzilla takes them out. It's just like Godzilla destroys one tank and they're all like, run away, run away.
That was our best tank.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh no, the commander's dead. Let's get out of here. But it underscores the fact that the military isn't going to do squat. And this is something that happens later. There's that line where the general says, attacking Godzilla, it's like firing into a volcano. They've learned their lesson after two encounters with Godzilla that, shooting at him with cannons and whatnot, that just doesn't do the job. So Godzilla's coming, and Japan is preparing. And all Taco can think about is the free publicity is the other rival companies getting because the Seahawk connection. They're the ones that are benefiting from this. And whereas his team just has produced nothing. So he says, find this mammoth evil spirit ASAP. Send them a telegram. Tell them to, stop loitering and addicting the natives to cigarettes and go find this thing. And so Sukomi and Furoi go into the island. They're looking around, and there's definitely some ominous stuff, but Furoi gets jungle fever. And so they go back to the village. They are recuperating. And then you have the attack by a giant octopus. And
oh my goodness, that was so fun.
It was.
That was great.
So I just got to start that out though. I saw it coming from behind the hill, and I'm like, is that the blob? What is that?
Same. I was like, is that a slug?
Yeah.
I was watching with my boyfriend. I was like, what is that? I was like, I need a second opinion here. I wrote in my notes, big octopus, big smiles. I was so happy to see that.
Yeah, it's an actual octopus too. Like they
it
put
is.
a living octopus on this little miniature set, and Oh, I want to do that. There's probably some legal stuff around that nowadays.
Oh yeah, you definitely have to, get PETA involved to make sure that, otherwise they're going to protest.
Yeah, a handler.
What I find so fascinating
Just tell them it was CG.
What I find so fascinating about this is that what you see in this film this is a microcosm of what you see in the film, which you see all of the special effects of the time on display, because this was around the time they were doing they were trying to do like these big monster movies, and some of them were on the cheap. And here the iconic figure is Bird Eye Gordon, who was the master of taking like lizards and insects and then kind of, having them in the background. What do you call that? Where you have like
it's compositing.
Yeah.
So for example, every single shot that they have the octopus in, they make sure to have people in the front, and that gives the sense of scale and just,
And Bird Eye Gordon, you watch his films, compositing is horrible. This is done, I think, as well as you can. And it means that you can actually have an actual octopus moving as an octopus would. How they got the octopus to move is kind of, bad, and why we have things like PETA nowadays, but they got it to, actually, doing, and then you have it seizing natives, and they're using stop motion for that. You actually have honest to goodness stop motion animation in it, which is something that they had proposed with the original Godzilla. Too expensive. They proposed it with this one. It was too expensive, but they do just a little bit of it, and it's like a nice homage to the original Godzilla.
Yeah, that shot where it grabs the native and he goes all shaky. Like, that's, oh my goodness. It's deliciously janky is what I think I put in my notes.
It is. But it's also it's a very loving touch, I think. Too.
Yeah.
And you think, okay, they have...
Before you go on, the stop motion, I did notice for the shots where, this is jumping forward story-wise, but where Kong is drinking those pots, those shots where he's drinking, the mouth on the suit doesn't move. So I think that's why they use stop motion to get him drinking the pots. So you can see that jaw move.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
So because oh my gosh, I have so many notes about that suit.
Yeah.
But you think, and one of the other things I like about the octopus attack is the misdirect. You think, here's the mammoth evil spirit, but no, it's not, because the octopus attack is erupted by King Kong, who demonstrates the fact that the natives need to fire their contractors because he just busts through the screen, and he basically chases off the octopus, and and this is where you also see Kong's signature move. He throws rocks at it.
Yeah.
It's like you'll notice he does that throw. If there's ever a threat, the first thing he does, he chucks a few boulders at it. So but it works in this case. And
story wise, the thing I love about this is he's sold as a monster, but he arrives as a hero.
Yes.
It's like it gets you on his side immediately, because he's like, they kind of do the same thing. This is jumping forward to Criss Cross, but in the Godzilla versus Kong is very much the main character, and they do a more strong through line in that one, but you can see part of the same stuff going on.
Well, and I think what you're seeing there is the fact that King Kong is the hero of the movie.
Yeah.
He is, and this is something, if you go all the way back to the beginning of the movie, the opening music with the credits, it's not the standard Godzilla theme. It's the natives' music that is associated with Kong.
Yeah. I love that music.
Yeah.
And I didn't recognize it later when they start chanting it, but
you don't necessarily recognize it when you're first when the credits open, because you haven't really heard it in the movie yet. But yeah, I mean it's not the standard dun 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 dun. Yeah. It's the native.
We should not sing on this podcast.
I shouldn't either. But it also underscores, I mean, people talk about the difference in the titles. King Kong versus Godzilla, Godzilla versus Kong. There is a lot of meaning in that. And this goes something, again, I was going to cover a bit more in Criss Cross, but in 1962, Godzilla was not the star. King Kong was. Godzilla was big, but this is only his third movie. He hasn't even been, around for a decade. Kong has been around for a generation. He is a global icon. And so this is very much Kong's movie. And Godzilla is the villain, which is demonstrated by the fact that he sinks the sub, he, destroys the military base. He's coming for Japan, and nobody is looking forward to his visit. Whereas Kong is, he's protecting the natives, and then he helps himself to some shots of berry juice. And oh my gosh, that costume is so bad. I think this is where you get the origin of the idea that in the Japanese version, Godzilla was the hero, because they really did Kong dirty with that suit. Oh my gosh, it's just so badly done. The jaw, the face. You notice how the length of the arms change?
Oh, I didn't know
didn't.
You'll notice it in most of the scenes. They give Kong long arms, and it was the suit just had the thing. They just basically had the actor with poles for the hands. Whenever Kong picks something up, you'll notice that suddenly his arms are normal length. So, and it was because they were trying to make it look like an ape, but they either ran out of money, ran out of time, just didn't care. You don't have that problem with Godzilla. but with Kong, it's just, the suit it does not look great. But the headshots, which you had there.
Oh yeah, the close-ups.
That was actually a separate thing, and they did have some degree of articulation, and you needed it for that. But we find out that Kong's a lightweight. How many did he drink? Like 4 or 5 of those things? Took 4 or 5 shots, and they start playing the music, and he passes out.
Yeah.
And I thought it was strange that this is their god, and yet they're roofing him, basically. It's like, what are you doing?
Well, they don't know they're roofing him. I think they're like basically saying, thank you, now take your well-deserved rest. And Sakome comes with the idea that he's going to transport Godzilla back to Japan on a giant raft, which is something you'll see referenced in the 76 movie, in the 05 movie, but they never actually cover in the original. They never show how they get Kong back from Skull Island to New York. But here we're actually seeing it. And then, of course, Mr. Taco learns about this, and he's happy because now he's got his own kaiju to promote pills because they're for a pharmaceutical company.
It's just so bizarre. I don't understand.
Yeah.
Even after you've explained, I don't understand.
Yeah, I was having trouble understanding. I was like, okay, so it's like a TV show. No, it's like a TV studio, but also they sell like pills.
Yeah. Well, I think they're the sponsor for the show.
Yeah, they're the sponsor of the show. And that was still very much a thing back then. So they're transporting Kong back to Japan, and Mr. Taco is so excited about it, he has to go out there to kind of be on the boat himself.
Yeah, he helicopters in, and he grapples down from a helicopter. I was like, who's this guy?
Yeah, that shot.
I was like, oh snap, it's their boss.
Yeah.
And he's wearing a safari suit too. Well, he's in the jungle, he's on a boat.
Yeah, the shot where he comes in at the safari shot. Well, okay. It's a big group shot, like giant Japanese movie group shot. I mean, Godzilla movie, at least. I haven't seen many other Japanese movies. But so he appears behind this group, full safari outfit, the crowd parts. It's like, what is happening here? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's kind of doubling down on its ridiculousness.
Yeah. And then that shot where he's lowered on, he's just so gangly, and I think they knew what they were doing with him. Yeah. I really had no idea at first, but yeah.
But then the boat is intercepted by the Japanese military. They have a destroyer out there, and they say Kong is barred from Japan. And you really can't fault them because they've already got one kaiju rampaging. It's like, we don't really need a second one right at this time. And then you cut to Godzilla trashing Japan. And I would love to get your commentary on this because the tonal shift in this is the scene that I think is most like the original movies, where there is no humor. You find out that Mr. Kazuo's back. They thought for a while that his freighter had been lost. They imply because the freighter had been destroyed by Godzilla, and that they thought Kazuo was dead. He comes back. He finds out that his girlfriend is on this train, and the train is approached. So you have the train stops. They have to evacuate the train because Godzilla's coming, and there is no humor in this. It is very much, it's played totally straight. Godzilla's coming. It reminds me a lot, not just of the original two Godzillas, but also reminds me of what you were talking about with 2014, the sense of scale. Godzilla is this gigantic presence in the background, and it's not that he
in
has
the train shots when he's approaching.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then he's trashing the train. He doesn't even care about the people. He's just like, I'm just going to, do my thing, and I'm not targeting people. I'm just a force of nature, and I'm just going to barrel on through. And it is so, to me, it points to what Honda did in the original movie. And it is so well done, but it is just so out of place, it seems, with the rest of the movie.
Yeah, there's this gag on the boat they keep doing with the TNT plunger, and I think the boss is, the two guys are leaning on it when he comes up.
Yeah. And
he's like, no, don't lean on that. They do it like 3 different times, and the final time got me. They do it again, and they're like, oh, no. And then they cut away.
Well, and of course, and this gets to the next scene, which is when the military is being told to do something about Godzilla, and and then of course they get word that King Kong is getting restless, and you get back to the boat, and Kong's waking up, groggy probably because he has a hangover, and they try to blow up the raft, and that's where you get that scene where it's like oh, okay, now we're gonna do it, and Mr. Taco, who almost blew it up previously, is like, no, don't do it, because he's a Pacific Pharmaceuticals property, and they do it. Turns out the plunger doesn't work for some reason, so they gotta blow it up, and then and then. And of course, this leads up to, they blow up the raft, but Kong survives, and now we get round 1. And where Kong is rampaging through Japan, Godzilla is rampaging through Japan, they meet up.
This is so great. So they show the 2 shots of, they have these mountains in the side of it, which gives you the scale, and they're walking past, they're behind the mountains, still bigger than them. I think it's just the full movie buildup. This is the derpiest you've ever seen these guys, but it just feels so epic. Like, I don't know. I love this movie. Fun was the word that kept coming back to me.
It's definitely fun. It's definitely fun.
And it was definitely epic. I mean, this was the first time that you had this major global phenomenon encountering this other budding global phenomenon.
Yeah.
And this was going to be the battle royale, and it's so anticlimactic. Kong throws a couple boulders. Godzilla fires a couple rounds of breath. Kong's like, what? The octopus didn't shoot radioactive flame. He kind of brushes off like, I'm going to go this way now.
He even scratches his head. He's like, all right, I guess I'll just go over here. And he just turns around. He just leaves. Off. He doesn't even run off. He just stumbles away. That part was really, really funny. Yeah. I think a lot of the humor is like unintentional because Kong is such... he has human movements.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, I've done that before. I'm like, where I have to scratch my head. I'm like, all right, I'll go do something else now.
This didn't work. I guess I'll,
Yeah. And I don't know. How do you guys feel about Godzilla's movements? Cause I'm so used to the media, the Godzilla media that I've consumed. He's kind of just like, how do I say? He ducks around. He waddles around. But in this movie, he's like his hand. He has a lot of hand arms. Movements. He has a lot of energy in his upper body.
It reminded me of my baby nephew.
A baby, right?
I actually was just watching him at my cousin's wedding, the other reception the other night, and he. Same thing. He grabs at everything and he does the
uppies. I want uppies, That's Godzilla. And
you can't see us moving our arms like crazy.
Yeah. I just know the guy in there was just kind of going. I'm assuming their direction was I can't imagine what it's like to have that suit on. So he kind of get riled up, play a riled up lizard. How are you gonna do that? So you're just gonna improvise. But it kind of, I guess it kind of took me out because I'm so used to Godzilla. Just his hands don't really in the media that I've consumed, his hands don't really move, and he just kind of waddles around, and he relies a lot on his tail and on his what laser breath?
Well, radioactive flames.
Radioactive flames. Yeah.
I was surprised
that took me out of his arms and stuff, but it's derpy, and they were trying something new with the movie. So you get, in a way, the movie gets a pass with those types of things.
I love the derpiness. I ate it up everywhere.
It's actually an important step in the evolution of the character, because you watch the first 2 movies and it's exactly as you described it. He doesn't do much with the arms. When they have the battle in the second movie, which is I think it's the first kaiju battle ever with Anguirus. It's very animalistic. Here, they're beginning this process of anthropomorphizing it, to where Godzilla is more like basically a leathery humanoid with a tail, and to the point where you get to the 70s, and oh my gosh, do they go overboard with it? Godzilla dances around. He does.
Is that the one where they have the clip with they have the gif of where he goes up on his tail and like shoots across like a rocket?
Doesn't shoot, he flies.
He
literally flies. That's from Godzilla versus Ghidorah. And yes, that's where they really are kind of leaning into the silliness. Yeah. It really starts with this movie, and it gets to the point that one of the points I want to make in the crisscross, which is, but it's it is kind of a little weird. I wonder if they felt like they needed to do it because they were dealing with a very much of a humanoid creature that could fight like that, and they felt like Godzilla had to be able to do that as well. It'll be interesting to contrast that with what we'll see in GVK a little bit later on. So.
Yeah, same. I just thought about when you brought that up, that making them a match for each other. There's some stuff they do, and when we get to Godzilla versus Kong, I'll cover. Yeah.
But Kong's let everyone down, so the military's got to step up and do something about this. So they're saying, okay, first we're going to do the giant pit, and the pit works, but it doesn't succeed. So they do plan B, and they try to electrocute him. And this actually works. Godzilla apparently does not like 1,000,000 volts of electricity, so Tokyo is saved. But then they try it with Kong, and this is when you get something that you've never heard of before and will never hear of after this movie, but somehow electricity empowers Kong. He feeds off of it, which of course is going to be a good point for later.
Well, he seemed to take that nuclear ray pretty well too. It just left some burn marks on him, and he's like, "Okay, scratch my head, walk away."
Well, he didn't find it pleasant, I think, is the idea. But yeah, I mean, but now Kong, because the electricity didn't deter him, he's in Tokyo, and what are you going to do? You're on the town. You're going to pick up a date, and of course he finds Fumiko, who, having been saved by her boyfriend from being killed by Kong.
Well, quick footnote before you get too much further: these engineering feats that they have to pull off in Japan, it's fictional Godzilla Japan. They're just constantly having to build these huge traps, and there's going to be like the balloons that carry Kong later. I don't know.
I think that's where you get the sense of can-do-ness.
Yeah.
Which I think Japan probably really was feeling around that time, given the fact that they had recovered so fully from the physical devastation of the Second World War. It's like, hey, we rebuilt Japan in about 15 years. I mean, there's nothing we can't do. So, dig a Grand Canyon to trap Godzilla. We could do that in 3 hours.
Yeah.
So you have Kong with Fumiko, and he climbs, because this is a Kong movie. He's got to climb a building.
With a lady.
Yeah. Interesting footnote. This is apparently the only time in the entire Kong in all the Kong films where the woman is not a blonde.
Oh, okay.
Fay Wray, Jessica Lange, Naomi Watts, they're all blondes, but not Fumiko. And so
it's not many in Japan.
What? But Kazuo was like, no, don't shoot her. That's my girlfriend. I was thinking I might have to propose to her at some point. And it gives Sakurai the idea. He's like, hey, what we could, it reminded him, of the natives dancing. So he decides we're going to dope up Kong with berry extract, and, and then Sakurai serenades him to sleep with a drum solo. So.
Yeah, very bold of them to assume that Kong, and correctly so, to assume Kong was going to step down and then pass out, like climb down and then pass out. Cause I was like as I was watching the movie, I was like, if they're gonna drug him up, like he's gonna like I've been drunk, like put me on some sort of like height, and like I'm screwed, I'm falling.
Yeah.
But King Kong, he like stepped down from the building, and then he passed out, and then he took a snooze. But as I was watching the movie, I was like, that's too bold. That's too bold for them to assume, because he could have easily just fell off. But it worked out.
Very nicely went down for a little nappy poo.
Exactly.
So now they have, one kaiju passed out. What to do with him? Well, take him to fight the other kaiju. So it's interesting about how they have to basically now force this confrontation with Godzilla. Yeah. So they fly him up to Mount Fuji where Godzilla, he's just hanging out.
Poor Kong.
Yeah.
He just woke. Imagine waking up. You're hungover. You're like, oh god, I don't even want to go to the kitchen, and you're being ballooned to go fight like your enemy. Yeah. Like what? This poor guy. You can only root for Kong at that point. You're like, oh bro, like I'm sorry about this.
It's like a prank in a college movie. Yes. Where you wake up and you're like tied to the top of the flagpole. I'm like, how did I get up here?
Exactly.
We're tying you to balloons and weather balloons, and you're going to go to space. Yeah, is it weird that I bought the balloons more than I bought all the helicopters and stuff carrying them in the King Kong versus or the Godzilla versus Kong? Yeah. So they and of course, what do they do when as soon as Kong wakes up? They just dump him. They don't even land him. It's like we're just gonna blow the balloons, and he's gonna plop down, and he's gonna slide right into Godzilla, and it's round.
You'll know
2.
what to do. Blech. There you go.
And again, Godzilla gets the better of Kong. I mean, he's pretty much winning this fight until Kong is struck by lightning, and he's got these electrically charged fists, and he starts pummeling, and they battle. They're now in this area called Atami. There's a very famous castle there, which of course they demolish, which became...
Oh, that was so great. When I saw the miniatures of the buildings coming up, and then as soon as they showed that castle, I'm like, you better go by that castle, break that thing into pieces. And then they do. They don't disappoint.
And I don't know if you guys noticed, my boyfriend noticed it while we were watching, but I didn't notice it. On their first fight, Godzilla is like on a hill and Kong like approaches him. So it's Godzilla has like a high ground or some sort of advantage. In the second fight, King Kong is on a hill and Godzilla approaches him on a lower level. And I didn't notice that.
Huh,
he pointed it out, and I was like, oh, that has there's some meaning there. Like this is the fight that basically, it's kind of, there's subtext there. Like the other fight, Godzilla has more of like an advantage, but in this fight, King Kong has more of an advantage. He understands what he's against now, and he eventually, spoiler alert, he wins that fight.
Yeah, and it actually gets to a controversy because for a long time there was this myth that in the Japanese version Godzilla won. Well, we've seen the Japanese version. We know that Kong wins, and Toho's been very clear. Kong was the winner of that fight in the end.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the things I find so fascinating about the 2021 version, because I think the inversion of the names shows the transition that's taking place. Now, today, it's Godzilla that's the big franchise. Yeah. And in some respects, we wouldn't have Kong. We wouldn't have had Skull Island. We wouldn't have had Godzilla versus Kong. We wouldn't have had New Empire were it not for the fact that they, he's sort of, being carried along on Godzilla's, tail, so to speak.
So that was our review of King Kong versus Godzilla in 1962. And now for our review of Godzilla versus Kong 2021.
Well, this one has an interesting opening, which is you're opening somewhere on Skull Island. We see a day in Kong's life.
Well, the cinematography is beautiful, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
This orange glowing sun at sunset and these green hills, and they really up the contrast or the saturation on everything. And,
but it's all he's being Truman showed.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. You stole my joke.
Sorry.
It's true though. I didn't really. Yeah, that's a really good comparison. Yeah. It's being Truman showed.
They stole all of Truman Show for the first 5 minutes of this movie.
Yeah, but it kind of gets, something's happened since the events of Kong Skull Island to where the barrier, what have you, is collapsed. And now apparently, one, it constantly rains, which is a neat trick. And two, that they have to, whatever isolated Kong now has to be artificially maintained lest Godzilla come from. And it's kind of a contrivance, but I kind of liked it in the sense that it explains why we're going to see these fights between Godzilla and Kong. Mm-hmm. And here's where I'm not going to get too much into the comparisons between the two films, but it's like in the first movie, they almost had to force confrontations between Godzilla and Kong. And the only reason you have the first battle is because they are dragging Kong to Japan. In the second battle, they literally have to dump Kong on Godzilla in order to get a fight to take place. And here, there's this implication that because you have these two alphas that are going to have to assert some sort of resolve who's the dominant one, because you have King Kong and Godzilla, king of the monsters. Well, you can only have one king, and so we now have. But at the same time, nobody's seen Godzilla in years. So you get the opening credits with the info dump and the introduction of the Hollow Earth. And then you get Bernie Hayes, which is Brian Tyree Henry's character, recording the Titan Truth podcast about his ongoing infiltration of Apex Cybernetics. And this is where I start to have some issues. I'm thinking, okay, so there's a guy who is infiltrating this corporation, which is doing something hinky. And he talks about it on a podcast.
Yeah.
So why have they caught this guy? and this,
he was just way too eccentric for me too.
Yes.
This is the guy you're supposed to be rooting for, and yet they throw everything in there to make him look like the most eccentric guy.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're not doing a good job of getting me on board with this guy.
It's like I can imagine they're sitting around some point. How can we make this guy eccentric? Maybe he carries around some booze given to him by his late wife. Maybe he bathes in bleach. Maybe he talks to himself. All of the above.
Just put all of it in there.
Exactly. So, but Apex Cybernetics, which is a new thing, is like, what do they do? And there's this nice drop in that video where they featured the Walter Simmons character, the CEO, where he talks about, we're doing, cybernetics, we're doing, mind body thing. And they're kind of hinting as to what is to come with that. And yet they do it in a much more subtle and I think effective way. But we have Bernie sneaking in, and somehow in this corporation's doing something hinky, he manages to get access to a terminal where he can conveniently download all the information he needs to. Gosh, isn't that convenient?
So convenient. Yeah. You just got to annoy a guy. He annoys.
Send him to the bathroom for a little bit. Yeah.
He just talks the ear off of this guy. First of all.
Well, he uses his superpower of being super eccentric.
Eccentric. How is that not a red flag off the bat? Like if someone came up to me and they were like, "Hey, Karina, what's your favorite color? What you doing today? Let me tell you, you're my best friend now." I'd be like, "Someone keep tabs on this guy right here. He is way too friendly. Like he's not doing himself a favor by being hyper friendly, hyper eccentric, all that." And then on top of that, the guy just walks out of the room. Like, he's not like, "Hey, I need you to step out. I need to use the restroom." Locks the door. No, he's just like, "All right, well, you take care of this guy I just met. I'm going to go take a dump."
You're a strange guy. You annoy me. I'm going somewhere else. Watch my terminal.
Exactly. It's insane, but it's, it's not smart writing, but I guess it keeps the story going, but it's whatever.
I think for a film that is so loaded with homages that this one is, they should have done like a Mission Impossible, when Tom Cruise is. I mean, there is a great bit about.
I don't think he could pull that off with his girth.
It would have been funny to at least see him try.
Yeah.
But of course he gets a big assist because he's in the middle of this, and who shows up but Godzilla, and boy is he mad. I just love this introduction. He just comes in, and there's no, "I'm just here doing my thing." He's just like, boom, boom, boom. He's just blasting the place. Plane shows up. They're an annoyance. It's like, getaway flies. He's clearly upset about something. We don't know what it is yet, but it gives Bernie the chance to get into a part of the facility that he might not otherwise get into. I do like how he's on the verge of being stopped, and then he gets an unexpected assist from Godzilla when Godzilla basically torches the two guys along with half the building. And then he sees this, mysterious device, which he then just proceeds to, leave. So, but then we find out that among Bernie's loyal audience is Madison Russell, who, Millie Bobby Brown's character, and she's trying to convince her dad, Mark, who now apparently is, a big poobah in the Monarch organization, that Bernie is onto something. And here we get that wonderful trope that you see in so many kaiju movies. The kids are smarter than the adults. Yeah. So,
and also we're introduced to, we skipped over the humans at the beginning, which is an easy thing to do in these movies.
Yes, it is.
So we had Team Kong at the beginning, which is really great how they did that, because it's the first time you meet them, and you're immediately sold on this little deaf girl that is the only one that can speak to Kong.
Gia, yeah.
And if it were just the lady, like you might not be sold on this team, but you've got that connection, and that's probably the strongest emotional through line.
And she is so good in that role. I mean, child actors, their quality can vary so much, and she is just so good in that role.
But now we meet Team Godzilla, and they don't know what Godzilla's doing, but they're trying to figure it out. So.
I kind of think it was Team Madison, because she's really the driving force.
It's too bad. I wish we would have followed him more. And we'll get into Millie Bobby Brown and the podcaster guy. This whole thing, I was not on board for that, but we'll get there.
It was. It gets to something about the movie, which is that it's very busy.
Yeah,
not quite as busy as the second movie, but my gosh, is it busy! But and of course, the business is underscored by the fact that just as soon as we discover that Madison is thinks that Bernie's onto something, we cut to Denham University of Theoretical Science, which is a nice shout out to the original Godzilla, where we get to meet Dr. Nathan Lind, who is approached by Walter Simmons, who you would think would be busy with the fact that his U.S. base of operations has just been destroyed by Godzilla, but no, he has time to go off to this university because he and Ren Serizawa want him to lead this expedition to Hollow Earth. And this is where we start finding about Hollow Earth, which is this place that we know exists, we just can't get to it in the movie. And the trick is we're going to need Kong. So he wants Lind to talk to Eileen Andrews, Rebecca Ferguson's character, about getting Kong to help them access it. Now, I can't remember, is there a prior relationship between Andrews and Lind, or are they meeting each other for the first time?
That's the impression I get in the movie, that they kind of know each other.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not 100% sure what their relationship is, though.
Yeah, I'm just glad at least they didn't, decline to the trope of they were once husband and wife, exactly, or lovers or something like that, which is so often the case in these movies.
Before we jump past the Hollow Earth thing, this is a big thing to swallow.
Yeah.
There's a lot of big sci-fi things that they ask you to swallow in this one. Yeah. My dad actually met a guy that believes in Hollow Earth, and anyway, it's funny.
That's not an invention of the movie. I mean,
it's not.
Hollow Earth has been around for a while.
It's a conspiracy theory that floats around. The way the real one goes, I'm doing air quotes, just so you know. Apparently, up at the North Pole, my dad said this guy told him there's a big hole there that you can just walk up and then walk right into this. And it's like a shell, basically. Not like they do it in this movie where you have to go really deep to get there. You just walk in and, nope, there's a whole nother Earth in here. And the gravity shifts. And anyway.
Yeah.
But that's a huge aside. Let's get back to Godzilla.
I actually think it's an interesting thing. I just want to kind of develop, because it's something that, you go back to the original Godzilla, and there's a sense, I think, you watch those early movies, you read those novels and stories that are written at that time, and there's still a sense of places unexplored. And I think you see this with what I think is often an under-acknowledged source for King Kong, which is Conan Doyle's The Lost World, which, if you want to see the template for King Kong, that's the film to watch. 1925. It's sort of, there's an expedition to...
We might have just found another Criss Cross episode.
Actually, it's not a bad one. Yeah. We're the expedition to this, hidden plateau. They find dinosaurs. They bring one back to London. It gets out. It wreaks havoc and so forth. And I think back then, and this is something that's duplicated in all sorts of stories. But nowadays, it's like that becomes increasingly implausible. We've mapped everything. So where are you going to find these hidden places where you can introduce these mysteries? Well, we'll just, have a Earth's basement where we keep all that stuff. So, and discover that. I mean, it's kind of like, really, but at the same time, it's like, well, I mean, what's the alternative?
They sell it well in this movie.
They do sell it well in this movie.
They do it well.
So Lynn goes to Andrews, and he sells her on the idea that they need to do this. And it's really interesting how they do it. The idea that Kong really is out of place. He's in effect confined to this island. You can tell from the opening, Kong is not happy with the situation, but it's like, what are they going to do? And I think it's plausible. Like, see Lynn sort of selling Andrews on this idea that, look, he's not where he should be. Hollow Earth is going to be the best, is the most likely place where he's actually going to be able to live free like he used to. And so she convinces him to do it. And they load him up, nicely doped. Again, good callback. And they're escorting him with nothing less than an entire carrier battle group, which is really neat. And yet they also bring Gia. And they hadn't established at that point that Gia can communicate with Kong. So it's like, okay, we're going to go ahead and take this Titan to this place, and let's go ahead and bring a little girl along too. Yeah. It's like, were there no babysitters available?
And of course, storytelling wise at this point, the Hollow Earth is the MacGuffin. So
yes, very much
that's
so.
Giving us our direction for where the plot's going.
Yeah. And then we cut back to Pensacola, where Madison and her friend Josh track down Bernie, which apparently is incredibly easy to do. Yeah. So again,
yeah.
Where's Apex Cybernetics' security on this?
Yeah. They found Bernie by tracking down where he buys all his bleach that he bathes with.
Yeah. What? Which somehow they know how he bathes, or that he bathes with. Maybe he said it on the podcast. I don't know.
Can you even do that? Can you bathe in bleach and be okay? And they imply that he bathes in a lot of bleach.
If you've got any sores or anything like that, I don't think that would.
Maybe that's why he's so eccentric. Just all those fumes. He's just cooking his brain.
Yeah, exactly. Doing some damage up there. So, but I mean, it's not exactly like it's the worst thing. So,
but they find him,
and they find him. It's like he's infiltrated this $1 billion corporation that's up to some shady stuff, and he is broadcasting that he's an infiltrator, and yet he somehow can be tracked down by just asking around and finding out who's buying gallons of bleach. So it's just like, oh boy, it's easier to accept the notion of a hollow Earth than it is to accept the fact that this guy has somehow escaped notice. But they convinced him to break into.
I'm going to tell my dad about the bleach thing. Maybe we'll start doing it.
Well, you don't want your inheritance to go to Clorox. I mean, maybe not.
Wasn't sold on the Hollow Earth. Maybe it'll be sold on the bleach.
So the task force, they're sailing south. They're in the Tasman Sea, and Godzilla shows up. And this is, for me, the best battle in the movie because
so good. Yeah,
it is. It's because
okay, before we get to the actual battle, let's get some groundwork on the ship. That shot where she's out on the deck, the little girl, and the finger comes down and she has her little finger out, and it's just this amazing shot where you see their fingers meet, and you're just terrified at first because they haven't set up they can communicate thing, and that's probably why. So you feel the tension there, and then Kong says home.
Yeah. And
there's a lot more of an emotional through line to Kong in this one, which I guess that's the theme of it because we'll get there. But I mean, you guys know spoilers. You know where it's going, and it's some kind of a home that he's going to. So,
and that really is one of the best things about this movie, I think, is the fact that they developed that.
Yeah.
I mean, did they make it quite that emotion? Do they have quite that emotional connection with Kong and Skull Island? I don't recall.
I can't remember.
For Skull Island.
It's heavily just, it's kind of like they want you to believe it. Like there's no build up. There's no care to it, but you kind of infer that that Kong and like the Brie Larson and Tom Hiddleston character are like on the same like they can understand each other. They understand. All right, this is the plan. This is how we're going to defeat the Skull
Yeah,
crawlers.
there's a lot of nonverbal communication. They don't have the communication.
There's
part
like
of
an
it.
there's like an understanding, but there's no you just kind of just have to accept that there's understanding. There's no like build up to it or trust, like trust build up.
Yeah,
But
I felt more out
works.
of John C. Reilly's character in terms of his emotional journey than I did Kong's in that movie.
Yeah.
Whereas in this one, it's like, you know, you're really you're seeing that, you know, with Kong, and it is very nicely done. And it, you know, and the amount of screen time that Kong gets versus Godzilla in this one, which is interesting because this is now Godzilla versus Kong, and this is film 3 in the MonsterVerse franchise.
yeah.
You know, it's Godzilla's franchise, and yet this is very much of a Kong-centric movie. Well, 4, I suppose, if you include Kong Skull Island. But you have the battle scene, and this, I felt, I mean, I have so many issues with the second film, but I do feel that Weingart in this film does a better job of evoking what Edwards does in the first one about scale. About how you have all these ships, which is this very powerful force of weapons, aircraft carrier, you have a battleship for some reason, you've got cruisers, and Godzilla just brushes them aside. I mean, he's swimming, he sinks the battleship. He doesn't torch it, he doesn't tear it
He
apart.
just happens to knock it when
He just cleaves it in half using his fins.
He's just going on a leisurely stroll. That's it.
And the plane, he sinks 2 ships with just like one whap of his tail. He takes out 2 at once. Very efficient. And it's because he is like, it's Kong. He is so fixated upon Kong, and Kong, he gator wrestles Godzilla, and then he hops on board the aircraft carrier, and Godzilla and he and Godzilla fight it out, and then Godzilla, he tosses Godzilla in the water, and Godzilla just torches the carrier. And at this point, it's like Godzilla, not only is Kong going to lose, he's going to die. Godzilla is dragging him down. He's going to drown Kong until the humans bail him out. And then they trick Godzilla into thinking that he's won. So it's Godzilla 1, Kong 0.
And let me touch on the scale for this real quick, because so the scales for Godzilla, he's like 500 feet tall, I think, and we'll just say that for this. It might be different, but Kong in the first movie was in Kong Skull Island. Kong was 100 feet tall, which is much bigger than we've ever seen him. He's usually about 25, and he was I think he was a teenager in that one. And so now they've upped his scale to 500, the same as Godzilla. But then they kind of undermine that a little bit of when they're standing on the carrier. I was going to say Star Destroyer. That's not what it is.
The aircraft carrier.
On the aircraft carrier. They're both standing on there, but they're only like, if you take that, is it called the conning tower? Anyway, the tower on the
island.
Yeah. If you take that, it's about 3 of those tall, which would only make them, I don't know. If you compare it to them standing next to the buildings later, they're much taller.
I mean, I think you've hit upon something that you frequently see throughout all these kaiju movies, which is that sometimes they do muck with scale.
Yeah,
you saw it in
play
King
around
Kong
with
vs. Godzilla too. Sometimes Kong was taller. It's sort of like he's the size he needs to be for
Exactly.
Whatever's convenient at the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, what's fascinating though is that even though they've managed to trick Godzilla, the fact is that in like 5 minutes, he's wiped out the entire battle fleet, and they still aren't even to Antarctica. So they got to figure out a way to get them there. So, and we'll get to that because we got to go back and see, Team Madison breaking into Apex Cybernetics, and again, there is no security. I mean, you have the opening shot where they're walking in. There are these 2 cop cars, and there are no cops. And they're walking in this top secret facility, again, doing shady stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, here's a shipping container. Oh, here are these skull crawler eggs. And then suddenly just somebody closes the door, and pretty soon they're on some sort of hyperloop to Hong Kong. And it's like, it's like the writer's like, okay, I got to get my characters to Hong Kong. I'm going to invent X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to remove A, B, and C. And that way we can minimize the amount of screen time. Because apparently Weingart was like, he wanted to do an efficient film. He did not want to do 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
And so it's like, we're going to go ahead and not have it be a puzzle that needs to be solved. We're just going to have these people conveniently going exactly where they need to go to get exactly where they need to go, and nobody's going to stand in their way until we suddenly need them to.
Yeah.
So,
It does beg the question, like why? Why do we need all these characters? And I can't, but at the same time, and I guess we'll get there, the other movie also had a lot of characters too.
yeah.
I can only assume that perhaps, like, because we can, I can still understand, I'm not a gorilla, but I still understand like King Kong and his struggle being like a loner and just kind of having to deal with the situation that has been placed before him.
Yeah.
And I can only assume with so many human characters that the writers and the creators wrongly assume that like us as human beings need other human beings to connect with and sympathize with, or see ourselves with. But I don't think necessarily that's true. I think maybe we need a couple. But sometimes I felt as I was watching this movie that there was just too many like human characters.
I think if they would have got rid of these 3 specific human beings, it would have streamlined the movie a lot more. I mean, they do a couple very important things for the plot, but I just was not on board for these guys. Like teenage Millie Bobby Brown, I haven't seen her in many other stuff recently, but her character in this movie, it was nails on a chalkboard to me. And
there's this trope going on in Hollywood of like smart children, and I can't buy it. I've never met a smart children are sharp and they're growing, but I've never met one that's like that can like, break into like a cyber technology government building just like that. You know what I mean? No security. They still need to check my receipt at Walmart. but there's no security in these buildings because she's super smart. She could, I don't know. It's a trope.
She has Bernie helping her, and we know how stable Bernie is.
Yeah. That's the thing for me is just her belief in him. Like, you know all this stuff. I'm buying fully into this thing. She's like an activist for whatever his deal is. I'm like, okay, you did not sell me on this guy, and now you're putting Millie Bobby Brown on board with this. The only ray of light I saw coming in there was Ricky Baker coming in from Hunt for the Wilder People.
Oh,
Julian Dennison.
The other kid, that's with them. He really is like a comedic, like his purpose up until the end, but even that's kind of a bit of a stretch. He's really just like the comedic.
Script did not serve him well for this.
No, he's the comedic relief, but I found him to be a little bit more like dual. Like I found him to be less insufferable than the other two.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah, a little bit less, but it's like he's also conveniently has the computer skills they need at various points.
Yeah. Even
though Bernie's supposed to have the skills as well, because as we know, he can, if he can't hack his way into a terminal, at least he can nag the operator to going somewhere else so he can get it.
Exactly.
So
I'm glad, you know what? I'm just glad the actors got their paycheck. I'm glad people got paid.
Yes.
But
just cut those scenes.
There are a lot of characters.
I really wish we followed the dad. Like that actor.
That actor is he's a veteran.
Yeah, Kyle Chandler.
Kyle Chandler, yes.
Not just that, Lance Reddick is in this. He plays the head monarch guy. You see him only for like 2 scenes at the end. It's Lance Reddick. And the guy's amazing. He was in, Fringe. He's been in the John Wick series.
Wait, Lance Reddick was in the?
Yeah.
Oh, I saw him for like one shot.
It's probably because it literally is. If you blink, you'll miss him.
Oh yes.
They should have made him the head of the company.
I know, the head of the company. They should have basically.
If they made him the conspiracy guy, I'd be on board, even if he were the.
And he would have been amazing. It's just like it's just such a messy movie.
It is.
There's got a lot going on in it.
Okay, while we're ripping on it, I got another
Go
thing.
Go for it.
Okay, so this goes down to exposition delivered through dialogue, which is a huge problem with modern movies. Like, okay, so we have the first guy, the Hollow Earth guy, the thing about his brother that he died on an expedition to the Hollow Earth, it's completely said in dialogue. It's like you could very easily I don't know, do that in another way.
Yes.
And then the conspiracy guy, Bernie has a flask that has something. He's got to explain this to you because, of course, you're not going to know. He keeps it in a holster, like
Chekhov's flask.
Yeah, Chekhov's flask. Yeah, they do a setup and a payoff with it later, which is what Chekhov's gun is for you non-story nerds, which I hopefully convert you with the show. So he explains this whole big backstory of his wife, and it's like, the only way I can think of explaining it is to explain a better example from a better movie, which is The Apartment, which is why I watched that. In The Apartment, so the premise is Jack Lemmon is lending out his apartment to these other higher up bosses that are using it for one night stands. And so then Shirley MacLaine's character is elevator operator in his office, and she's having an affair with the big boss. They end up going to Jack Lemmon's apartment when he's not there, and she leaves her mirror there. And actually, Jack Lemmon finds it, and it's broken, and he gives it to the boss, and he's like, "I think you left this here," and he doesn't know it's hers, of course, because he just found it, and it's broken. They take that, and he's like, "Okay," gives it to the boss. The boss gives it to her, and then he sees it later when she takes it out to adjust her makeup. And that tells him that the girl that he's interested in is with the boss. And it's like, oh man. and he asks about the mirror. And this is where you do the line of dialogue. The only line of dialogue you need is he's like, it's broken. She's like, yeah, I like it that way. Makes me look how I feel. It's like, are you kidding me? That's Billy Wilder writing, where you just take an object or one line of dialogue and you can say something about a character that is so much better than, oh, my wife, she likes this flask, or I don't even remember.
Well, it's pretty obvious that Tom Stopper didn't exactly do any sort of script doctoring for this.
Yeah.
So,
anyway, so off my pedestal about that. It's kind of a mini Facets episode. So if you liked that, go check out that show, Facets of Story.
And it's not that they couldn't have done something to make it. I mean, for one thing, do we really need a long explanation of why he has this? I mean, the guy's already been established. He bathes in bleach. The fact that he has a flask in a holster is not the craziest thing about him.
Yeah.
We don't need to have it explained.
Explain the bleach first.
Exactly.
That could just be a little like a character like quirk of him. Like every time, like he just takes a shot of his flask every time like shit hits the fan. You know what I mean? Like especially at the end.
They could have done that, and then at the end, they could just ask him, "What's with the flask?" And it's like, "It was my wife's." Boom, that hits. Like it's, yeah. They just did it the most clunky way possible.
Yeah. I mean, it's right there. It's personal because it's his wife's. He's using the past tense. That's all you need.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's it. But he had to bring out photos. He's like, "You want to see what you look like? Here you go."
Here's my exposition dump for this piece. I think what they were dealing with is they're like, okay, we've got this one scene to sell this character with. Okay, load in the exposition.
And it's not. There's kind of a lack of trust in Brian Tyree Henry, because the thing is that the performances are not terrible.
Yeah,
no,
he does a good job. As annoying as he is, he sells the character. I mean, he is who the character
for sure
is supposed to be.
Yeah.
So it's not like we need to do. And if you want to make him sympathetic, I mean, you could do it much more subtly. But let's face it. I mean, in a movie with 400-foot tall creatures, subtlety is not exactly a component.
Yeah.
So. But we get to how they finally get Kong to the Hollowworth portal, which is through the airlift that you've already referenced with King Kong vs. Godzilla.
Yeah, and the entrance to that, I got big Halo vibes of there's a part in Halo 1 where I forget what it is. They're going down into a thing that's made out of concrete and it's massive. And anyway.
Yeah. And then, of course, you get down there and it's like, it's, again, it's all wonder and awe. And then here comes the welcome wagon, these gigantic flying snake creatures, which takes out one of the craft before Kong kills them. So we know that this is a gorgeous place, but also full of horrors. So, And then we get back to Team Madison, who are in Hong Kong, and this is when we discover Mechagodzilla. And again, they just get off the chamber. They walk. They get off. They get out of the Hyperloop. They walk right into the chamber. They're just sitting here watching this thing happen.
They just walk through hallways like it's a school or something.
They're walking upright. Mind you, they just got out of a chamber with like what do they call it? Skull crawlers?
Skull crawlers, yeah.
Skull crawler eggs that was traveling. You see it in the meter. They show you in the movie. It's going like, it's about to hit like 1,000 miles per hour or something like that, or 900 miles per hour. And then Millie Bobby Brown goes, all right, hold on. And I'm like, how are you guys not like glued to the wall? They just cut it there. And then, anywho, I'm nitpicking. But yeah, they just walk out of there just upright.
And there's nobody there to unload the stuff.
Nobody there to unload the skull crawler eggs.
Yeah.
No, like, nothing to like.
They could have easily put in a thing there where, okay, that other facility, everybody's going there because we got to fix everything.
Yeah.
So this one's low staffed, like Skeleton Crew or something. Just a throwaway bit of exposition.
Skeleton Crew on the building that harbors Mechagodzilla.
Yeah.
At least it's something.
Exactly. or maybe that everyone's been called up because they're about to do another Mechagodzilla test, but it's this. But in this, of course, we get to the contrivance, which is that they've built this Mechagodzilla, and I gotta say, as motivations go, Simmons isn't bad, which is the fact that he, and you get it right in the name of the company. He sees people as being the apex. He hates the fact that there are these gigantic, titans to. That jeopardize man standing, and he wants to assert it. And it's not a great motivation, but I get that. I mean,
I also get
they could have
that,
made that much more sympathetic had they introduced that sooner. But yeah,
but it's kind of like a Lex Luthor Superman thing, where it's just like he hates the fact that Superman, is better. So he's going to do everything he can to undermine it. So, but we get the fact that they've got this great Mechagodzilla that they're building, but it just doesn't have enough power, and that's why they're so obsessed with Hollow Earth. Somehow, Hollow Earth has unobtainium or whatever. They're going to use it to power Mechagodzilla, but it turns out that there's something kinky going on, and in addition to that, and now Godzilla's heading for Hong Kong.
Yeah. Okay, so I missed this part. I'm just jumping back real quick. There's a 2001 Space Odyssey reference.
Yes.
When they go from in the gravity well that they've got to go through, I guess that's what it's called. They go down the tube to Hollow Earth. There's the part where the gravity shifts. It looks like it looks exactly like it, where if this wasn't an homage, it's direct stealing. It looks exactly like the Stargate sequence in 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh yeah, I didn't. It does. Yeah, even with the facial expressions, because they'll cut to the woman actress. I forgot her name, Rebecca Ferguson,
yeah.
And then they'll cut to Alexander Skarsgård, and they're like doing these faces. Yeah. I guess it does.
It's one of the things that kind of was, a persistent pet peeve of me with this movie. Which is
wait a minute. Okay, it's Rebecca Hall.
Excuse me, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Rebecca Hall. Rebecca Ferguson is from Dune, right?
Yeah, Dune and Mission Impossible. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for correcting me. It's as though Weingart is so focused on homages. There's so many hat tips, and I get how
focus on your own story.
Yeah, exactly. I get how. I mean, we saw that in King Kong vs. Godzilla. Is that there were a lot of hot hat tips to the original King Kong, and I get that people there's a certain amount of fan service, but yeah, exactly. You need to be your own story. He's so focused upon injecting this element and this element and this element. It's like, be your own thing. Give me something new. Don't make me think as though that what you've done is. Which actually would explain a lot, which is that, this film is really just script pages from other films that have been bound together. We're going to shoot this.
Yeah.
But we're back to Hollow Earth now, and Godzilla finds a throne room complete with a giant battle axe. And I have to say, King Kong finds this throne room with a gigantic battle axe. And I have to say, this is one of those things where, when I went onto IMDb and I did some of the reading of the trivia, and apparently the battle axe, and this makes so much more sense once you know this, is made out of one of the dorsal fins of a Godzilla type creature.
Kong spine.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that explains why the axe can do all these things that it can. and how apparently the hilt is also made out of Godzilla's bones. And this gets to the fact that apparently this beef that Godzilla has with Kong is nothing new. There's kind of like this whole family thing. It's like Hatfields and McCoys, that they've just been going at it for, eons and
Oh yeah.
yeah. So
that is cool. I did pick up on that subtext the first time I watched it. I didn't really focus on it that much this time. The thing I love about that X is it's a ground leveler for him.
yes.
And it plays into his strengths as a monkey. Like he's got arms, so he can use tools. And so he's got this big cool axe that he can use. That Godzilla, as cool as he is, can't really do much with his paws or hands or whatever.
And he lacks that atomic breath advantage that Godzilla has.
Yeah.
But you're right, it's a leveler, and it's so much more. It's so much more appropriate than just the lightning thing in terms of leveling it
And
out.
also storytelling wise, this is called the plot coupon. It's a MacGuffin that does something. The MacGuffin was the Hollow Earth, but once he gets there, he finds this really cool weapon, and it helps him in the fight.
It's like a video game.
So,
He's found a
yeah,
cache.
exactly. Yeah, the plot coupons are basically from video games. The only other example I can think of off the top of my head is Star Wars Episode 9. The Sith Wayfinder is a plot coupon, because once you get it, it shows you how to get to Emperor Palpatine.
But you go back to Hong Kong. Team Madison finds out basically the other secret that Apex Cybernetics has, which is they have one of the skulls of Ghidorah, the antagonist from the last film, and that it somehow is allowing Ren to pilot Mechagodzilla, but it's not exactly clear how this is happening. But it doesn't matter, because Godzilla's arrived, and it turns out this is what's motivating him. He is sensing Ghidorah. He's got unfinished business with this, and he's going to take it down. And all of a sudden, it makes Godzilla's actions a lot more sympathetic.
Yeah.
He's been kind of an antagonist, but it's kind of plays. This goes back early in the film when Godzilla attacks the facility in Pensacola, and there's this sense of, oh, he was a good guy, now he's not, which was what Simmons' plan was, because he wants basically to turn the world against the Titans. But now kind of like it makes sense that Simmons has been kind of poking the bear.
Yeah. The thing I don't like about Godzilla in this movie is they use him as basically just a plot device.
Yeah.
Like he's just around when he needs to change the plot, and then it's not till the final battle that he becomes an actual character.
No.
It probably explains also why he's so antagonistic in it, because he's tired from having to swim from Pensacola to the Tasman Sea to Hong Kong to service the plot.
Yeah.
They could just put him in a hyperloop instead of there like they did the other characters. So, but then of course you have, and this is where it's getting a little too inconvenient. So he's also somehow sensing the signals from the Hollow Earth. So he burrows down to Hollow Earth.
Just a normal day cooking a hole to the center of the Earth.
So he did. What was the reason that he did that for? I can't remember, and I couldn't figure out. Did he know Kong was down there?
I don't know how he knew, or if he knew Kong was. He must have known, but I don't know.
Perhaps like Kong activated the axe in some way, and he felt it.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Or maybe it was just he got to that page of the script and like, oh, now I'm supposed to start.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's what we're doing today.
Oh, this is time for the fight. We got to shoot a hole to the center of the Earth.
Never mind the fact that I've got this threat right in front of me. I'm going to go ahead now and pull up another antagonist too. So,
what are you up to, Kong?
And this is when, and it's only then that Walter's daughter Maya, who's with the expedition, pulls out the device that allows Apex to power up Mechagodzilla. I mean, it would have been so much more obvious if somehow they made the connection at that point, and then Godzilla's doing it. But no, that's not how they did it. But that, of course, Godzilla's burrowing begins, stirring up things at Hollow Earth, and this is when you get all the vulture creatures. And I gotta say, there are all types of armor out there in the world. There's leather armor, there's chainmail, there's plate armor, but there's no armor that's quite as good as plot armor. Because I have to say, it's amazing how everybody dies except for Lind, Andrews, and Gia.
Oh my gosh, dude! It's amazing. It's almost like the vultures can sense their heart chakras, and they're like, you know what? We'll let you guys live. We won't go too hard on you guys. And talk about a character who you could really cut out and it will do nothing to the plot. Simmons' daughter.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It wasn't until that part where they made it to like Hollow Earth and then she finally had some lines of dialogue that weren't comedic. The entire time before then, I was like, I couldn't help but I was yelling at my TV screen. I was like, why are you here? Why are you here?
She is the plot representative of Apex.
Gosh.
No, that's basically all she is.
I genuinely thought she was just like an Instagram influencer or something. I was like, how did you get here? How did you make it to Hollywood?
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything. I'm not. This is not a critique on the actress, but it was just more like who is this character? She was nothing. She was able to get on the hovercraft, on the aircraft to go to Hollow Earth. What an achievement. But who are you? You know,
the weird thing is those ships is what broke the tension broke the suspension of disbelief for me. Just like
me too.
I'm like, okay, this is one sci-fi step too far.
Me too. You know what? All the other sci-fi was fine. I literally wrote it here in my notes. I was like, it's too sci-fi for me. Why? Why must every big budget movie nowadays need flying aircrafts? And that's it. Like everything else. Not everything else. The guy in the skull maybe it was a little too much, but the flying aircrafts, I don't know. It's definitely. I looked up the writers for this. One of them wrote on a lot of Marvel projects, so I was like, that's probably where it's from, because they're the big producer of flying aircrafts and stuff like that.
They could have done it, but they didn't show any development of it. Yeah. They're just like. Okay, they showed like a hologram of this is a ship that exists, and then suddenly they're flying around, and it's like, oh, okay, like I don't know.
And suddenly
it's just a jarring thing from the other movies.
And suddenly Lind is like manning it too.
Yeah,
it's like you just found out this existed through a hologram.
Yeah,
like how are you able to like fly it? But
see, the film had already broken me with the Hyperloop.
It's
kind of like we got this amazing technology, and we're basically using it to smuggle animal parts to China. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh. One, the Hyperloop. Two, the fact that we're wasting. The three, the fact that apparently you could take this thing, it's a magic shuttle, and you get there and it has no effect. I mean, you take a movie as bad as the Total Recall remake, at least they made an effort to make something like that plausible enough to where you're kind of like, yeah, it would probably, be a strain to fly something like that. But no, they're just like, oh, it's like, we're on the subway. We're in Hong Kong now.
I think the reason it is that way, because they've got Marvel movies and stuff that have all kinds of things like that. But they're asking you to buy Godzilla versus Kong, and that's basically the limit. And then they do some more stuff, a lot of other stuff, and it just breaks the suspension cable.
That's a good point. They're like, hey, if you believe Godzilla versus King Kong, then you'll believe
just buy all this.
We're using vibranium. Because we're just going to import that from Marvel. This is going to be the Marvel connection, the crossover. So.
Also, I'm nitpicking. I know I'm nitpicking, but like.
Okay, well, nitpick close to the mic.
I'm nitpicking. But helmets, they just walk out into this, they arrive to Hollow Earth and they just walk out with they have cool suits, sure. But no helmets, like no like breathing. They just assume you can breathe, perhaps because it's Hollow Earth. It's Earth. We live here. We can breathe. But I don't know. It's just like there's so many there's some details hold big significance, and I feel like there's like sometimes the details, like we need the smaller details to really sell the film, and this
kind of just jumping over hurdles to get to King Kong versus Godzilla at the
end. And it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. But sometimes things like that bring me out of the film.
Yeah.
If the King Kong versus Godzilla doesn't bring you out already, little stuff like that will bring you out of the film. It has, at the very least, has brought me out of the film.
And you think of the contrast with King Kong versus Godzilla, where it was so much more simplified. I mean, you didn't have to. Sure. You had the kaiju, and that was really it. That's all you needed. The berries, which were kind of a little bit convenient as well. But apart from that, it was kind of like we're just going to go ahead. We're going to have story connect the dots. We're not going to invent something to make it happen. So, yeah. But we get to Godzilla's board gets through. Kong's charging up to Hong Kong. We cut back to Team Madison, who are now. It's like they're not even bothering to try to hide because clearly there's no security. And then, of course, they conveniently get caught just when you need them to, so we can, match them up with Walter Simmons, and he can kind of, do his thing. But before we get that, we have to have the battle between Kong and Godzilla in Hong Kong. I have to say, visually, it is amazing.
Yeah.
It is beautiful.
For sure.
Yeah. And apparently that was Weingart that he was like, we've never really had a kaiju battle with so much neon and everything.
Yeah.
And it is just so, I mean, clearly Hong Kong, the insurance rates are going to be insane after this, but it is just so well done. The battle is just, and it really is kind of, that is kind of a really awesome payoff. Granted, you have to, swallow a lot of garbage to get there, but you're there. And even though at one point you have Lin saying, Kong wins round 2, he doesn't. Godzilla curb stomps him. He claws up his chest. He had that great scene where he's screaming in Kong's face, and Kong screams back, and then Godzilla's like, punk, and he walks off, and Kong proceeds to start dying.
I love those close-ups of them.
Yeah.
And then, okay, let me nerd about cinematography for a little bit here. I got a bunch of notes on this. So the shot when Kong comes up out of the hole, stabs the axe in the ground, people running in front of it immediately, and you see just how huge this axe is. Because up to this point, I was about to rip on the next movie, but whatever, maybe we'll get there. But just showing people in shots with these monsters just gives you a sense of scale. Because up to this point, you're like, oh, it's a normal size axe. I mean, that's what your brain's thinking. Yeah. Because you're seeing an anthropomorphic thing holding it. And then they've got a POV shot from, is it Kong's point of view? Or anyway, one or the other. And then, I'll end my little nerdy rant on, there's this shot where Godzilla is just clawing at King Kong's toes, and it was just terrifying. It was like, oh my goodness, that's so scary. Like, he's just barely missing the toes, and I would not want Godzilla biting after my toes.
One of the things I like is how distinctive they make their fighting styles in a way that I don't think they did as well in King Kong vs. Godzilla. I mean, Godzilla is fighting as an animal. He's on his all fours. He is clawing. He's not punching the way Kong does. It does create a nice contrast that adds to the film. And then of course you have the way that in the fight scene, Kong is very aware now of Godzilla's breath. And so he clamps Godzilla's mouth shut. He rams the axe into
Good
Godzilla's...
call back to shoving the tree down his throat.
Exactly. And then when none of that works, he spends there's like this extended moment where Godzilla's he's literally leveling the Hong Kong skyline trying to hit Kong. So cool. And Kong's dodging and weaving, and it's just so well done.
Realistically, if you look at these fights, I think they destroyed Hong Kong several times over. Oh yes, but it's fun.
That Hong Kong's a lot bigger than it needs to be. But I mean, let's face it. And when it comes to suspension of disbelief, I can buy Hong Kong being larger than it is more than I could buy, flying craft and hyperloops and whatnot.
Yes.
So it's as transgressions go, it's a mild one, but it's such a great battle scene. And Godzilla's like, okay, I'm done with you. And then we get Team Madison going to Walter, and Walter's gloating about his achievements and everything. They activate Mechagodzilla, and it turns out, whoa, guess what? Ren is not in the driver's seat. It's King Ghidorah's skull.
Oh, okay, real quick, jumping back to the key moment of that fight of him just, the build up to it so good. I can't think of cinematography wise how they do it, but the build up to him jumping up with that axe and coming down on him. And that's really what it is in the build up to it. If they had have just showed that shot and then just done that, you'd be like, whoa, what? And it's gone, and it wouldn't have any effect. But it's really the build up to moments like that. Like in Avengers, the moment where they have the big circle shot.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that works so well is because they have the big worm coming in before that shot, and the Hulk punches it, and the rest of them help blow it up. And then, so they just did a really awesome thing. They've earned that shot, and then they go around it. In the trailer, I'm like, they better earn that shot, and they did. It was so cool.
It feels like the entire film is built around this battle.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we're going to do the battle. We're going to extrapolate everything out. And if we can't quite get to the battle with normal means, we're just going to go ahead and make up this, silly contrivance. We're going to, the magical flying ship or the Hyperloop to get us there, because it's all about the battle.
Yeah.
And I got to say the battle is worth the wait.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah.
It's definitely the best part of the film.
Oh,
for
gosh,
sure. As it should be.
Yeah.
You can tell they had a million storyboards for that shot, and there's probably a bunch of stuff on the editing floor.
Yeah. And yeah, definitely have to see if it's available as extras on all the devices.
Yeah.
But we get Mechagodzilla entering the fray. And I have to say, I do love the scene where Walter's sitting there monologuing, and you seeing Mechagodzilla coming in.
Yeah, in the background. This is suspense, by the way.
Yeah.
They're in the background coming up.
And how Madison and Bernie and Josh, they could see it. They're like,
Yeah.
And he's too busy monologuing with his scotch in his hand. And then he turns around and he's like, oh boy. It's kind of like he knows he's done.
Yeah.
So that to me was especially since it was kind of a nice understated way to take out Simmons as the antagonist, is kind of like, okay, yeah, turned out wasn't such a great idea after all.
And could you refresh my memory? What caused Mechagodzilla to flip?
Apparently, once my take on it was that once he was fully powered, Ghidorah could take over Mechagodzilla.
Okay.
And I think the idea was that Ghidorah was somehow the means by which Ren could control Mechagodzilla,
as Ren.
Yeah, Wizard did it. Something, whatever, but as soon as Ghidorah's in charge, he kills Walter. According to the novelization, apparently Ren was planning to kill Walter anyway.
Okay.
And it had to do with this whole dynamic, which apparently is in the novelization, which didn't make it into the movie.
That would have added so much more depth to his character.
Yeah, it would have.
The story, perhaps.
This thing I sometimes enjoy. That's why oftentimes as a kid I would enjoy reading novelizations, because you get actual story. Apparently, this whole thing like Ren is supposed to be the son of Ken Watanabe's character from the first two movies, and it's a very different approach. And
I did not know
there's
that.
a whole emotional backstory there, which we of course never get because we have to have flying craft.
Yeah.
But now Mechagodzilla's has entered the battle, and he is just trashing Godzilla. And it's like, it's not a contest. It's the power. It's Ghidorah. Godzilla's probably still, wounded from fighting Kong. So on his own, Godzilla's going to lose. And then we finally see why they bring Lin back up and from the Hollow Earth so that he can do, because apparently it's not just a flying craft. It's also a Titan defibrillator. So we can go ahead and shock Kong's heart back so he can come back, and he pulls Martin Riggs' move and snaps his dislocated shoulder back into place, and he gets into the fight.
And it's interesting, they don't show any civilian shots, aside from the axe one I pointed out, until Mechagodzilla comes in. And then they show the classic running from the big monster shots for him.
Yeah.
Because it's very... it's very measured, I think, they want you to focus on these guys and not think about the collateral damage because they're your good guys. And then once you've got the bad guy coming in, it's like, oh no, now people are being crushed, where realistically they were the whole time.
And that's interesting when you compare it to the fight scene at the beginning of the movie. The first one where Godzilla shows up, they do emphasize scale, the people, the collateral damage. I mean, you see the people running, the plane one of the planes that Godzilla shoots down crashes in front of them. It's a nice callback to what made the first movie so effective.
Yeah.
But I hadn't picked up on the fact that you don't really see that as much. You see, the evacuation is taking place before the battle begins. But when the battle between Godzilla and Kong begins, apart from that one, I think it was like a police car. That's it.
When you say the first movie, you're talking about Kong Skull Island?
No, I'm talking about Godzilla 2014. But you do see it with the soldiers in Kong Skull Island too.
Yeah, I think that movie was pretty effective in showing the scale too, because Kong would grab helicopters and its fingers would go through the middle opening of the helicopter.
Sure. Yeah.
And so you get to feel, okay, cool, humans in this movie, in this world, are as big as his fingers. This guy is huge. So yeah, Godzilla did a great job with scale. 2014. And Kong Skull Island also did a great job with scale. This movie, there wasn't a lot of shots where you can compare. You understood based on the buildings, but when it came to like people.
Yeah, you got to see people in shots. It's the mirror neurons thing, I think.
There was one other shot where they did that I liked. It's when Maya dies. When she's trying to escape in the craft, and they make the mistake of shooting at Kong.
Yeah, I remember. He grabbed the aircraft, and he just went.
No. He does it first. He looks inside to make sure Gia's not in there. And then when it's not, and you can hear Maya going, no.
Oh my gosh.
It was nice. It was
satisfying.
Touch. It was very satisfying. Yeah. It's true. The deaths of the bad guys in Apex, they're very satisfying. Walter's death is satisfying. His daughter's death is satisfying.
And also the shot of the ship flying past Kong's open mouth.
Oh my gosh.
Gave me Universal Studios tour
Oh
vibes.
my goodness, right? And then is it the same shot where like the craft kept going and then it went towards Godzilla's open mouth?
And they had to avoid the flame.
Yeah, that shot. If you're gonna make a big budget movie, I'm expecting shots like that.
Yeah.
Like that's where the money should go because it looked awesome. Awesome. Yeah.
So, but we get the big battle scene, and they have to bring Godzilla. They have to bring Kong back to recover Kong, and only together can Kong and Godzilla defeat Mechagodzilla. And
real quick, this is a funny little gripe. When he comes out of the ship after defibrillating Godzilla, he walks out, and then the very next shot is him on the ground, like he's just somehow teleported to the ground. But,
yeah, they had to kind of skip over some stuff because we're kind of focused on the action.
Yeah,
it's one of the things is that when you think about the level of devastation and the obstacles that creates and how much slower it is to get around. I thought Pacific Rim did a good job of underscoring that. Mm-hmm. Pacific Rim is another one that had a really good sense of scale.
Yeah.
But this one, it's like the scale is there until we don't need it, until it's kind of inconvenient, and then we'll bring it back later. So,
yeah.
So, but we got Godzilla defeated, and Kong and Godzilla go their separate ways. And it's interesting to think about how Kong is now in Hollow Earth. Godzilla is not. It's almost like a divorce. Kong gets his half of the of Earth. Godzilla gets his half. and it feels like while Kong seems to be happy in Hollow Earth, it's it's not, did Godzilla really, was it really, who came out on top? It was kind of Godzilla.
So you would say Godzilla won this fight?
There's that neat bit at the end after they defeated Mechagodzilla where they're kind of like,
it looks like they're going to rematch, which I love. And then they kind of come to an understanding, and Godzilla walks away. And
Godzilla, I got nothing to prove. I beat you twice.
There's a moment that I guess I missed, but when he's doing the password, I was thinking like, because it's just a teenager doing the password, and I guess supposedly he's a computer genius or whatever, but he's like, bloop, bloop, bloop. Okay, it's not boobs. I wanted him to say that joke, but I mean, that's the kind of thing you get him for, but they just, I don't know. They misused him too.
I do like the fact that they never actually successfully fully break into it, that they have to kind of, dump the alcohol, as dumb as that was. At least it was not a case of a preternaturally smart kid somehow overcoming all the security. Yeah. Even though apparently Apex Cybernetics, I think the password probably was password.
And here's the question. When that alcohol poured into the thing, were you thinking about the guy's wife? Because I wasn't. Like
I wasn't. Yeah.
That's how you know it doesn't work.
Exactly. Exactly.
All I could think about was Bernie complaining about how you deprived him of his last drink, and he was angrier about not having that shot of whatever it was that he was about his wife.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's totally just
a clunky setup for.
It's just manipulative. They want us to care about Bernie using through his wife, but they don't don't go all in on that.
It's a fine backstory. They just need to deliver it better. Yeah. Okay, so it's its exposition through dialogue is a crutch of modern movies, especially blockbusters. Like Endgame, as much as I love it, the whole time travel is kind of confusing because it was just explained in dialogue.
Yeah.
But anyway, off my pedestal.
And that's the film. Every once in a while, two films will share a bond to transcend time, space, and even genre. These similarities go down to their DNA. So let's dissect and deconstruct, compare and contrast. It's time to go Criss Cross.
Criss Cross.
Okay, so I guess we'll start on my notes because I don't have many of them.
Go right ahead.
Okay, so the main similarities were just kind of the obvious set piece similarities where, okay, so like Godzilla on a boat, Kong on a boat. Let me see. Yeah, first encounters at sea. Kong on a boat asleep in 1962 one. Wakes up at 56 minutes. And then he's awake in the 2021 one. Well, I think he's asleep for just a little bit, but then anyway, that's a great suspense setup of when is he going to wake up. Of course, they don't do it that way because it's a Godzilla movie. But if Hitchcock were making this movie, that's the way he'd do it. Yeah, that's the first thing I've got. So,
well, I mean, I find there's this. I was earlier complaining about the homages and how Weingart really loads them up. But I have to acknowledge he is trying to be respectful to his source material, and it is fascinating to think about how there's so much of the basic structure that is replicated between the two.
Yeah.
We have Kong on the island. He is, in effect, that's his domain. And then Godzilla has the rest of the world. So Godzilla is able to kind of do whatever his thing is, and we have to basically drag Kong out. I feel like what he's doing there is he's not just doing an homage, but he's, replicating that structure. But what I find fascinating is the contrast between, in 1962, we have King Kong effectively galvanizing the Godzilla franchise. Would we really have the most, we have Kong in movies after 2005 were it not for the MonsterVerse and the Godzilla-centric MonsterVerse? I honestly don't think so.
Yeah.
So much in the same way I think that Kong made Godzilla a relevant phenomenon starting in 1962, so too Godzilla is kind of returning the favor.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. I just find that the franchise link to be very fascinating, and the story echoes definitely point to the fact that they're very consciously respecting what has preceded it. But we're seeing sort of the transitions take place where in the 1960s, Kong really was the greater, the larger figure. In the 21st century, people think of Godzilla first. You think about the number of Kong films that have been made, you can count them on your hands and you still have fingers left over. Kong, Son of Kong, King Kong vs. Godzilla, King Kong Escapes, the two King Kong remakes, Skull Island, and now Kong vs. Godzilla. This one that's coming out, New Empire, that's going to be just the 9th film featuring King Kong.
Considering he's been around for what, a century?
Nearly a century.
Only has... That's only...
Yeah.
Yeah, he only has 9 films. That's kind of...
That's insane.
You would have thought at this point there'd be like 27.
Yeah. By contrast, there were 9 Godzilla films by the end of the 1960s.
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
oh my gosh.
Because
what a leg.
After King Kong vs. Godzilla, they just started rolling those things out once a year. It was like Mothra vs. Godzilla. Then it was King Ghidorah. You get to Abira, which had Godzilla and stuff. Like by the time you get to 1970s, they've effectively gone at double digits. Then you have Heisei, Millennium, the modern era. They're like, I think, close to 2 dozen Godzilla films nowadays.
Wow.
And that's not counting things like Bambi versus Godzilla and all that. But I mean, it's just so much larger of a franchise. Whereas Kong, it's been very. It'd be interesting to consider why that is. Is it because of rights and everything? Because RKO just. I mean, they kind of were like, they had their big one, they cashed in with Son of Kong, and by the 1950s, they were gone. They weren't interested in making films, and they were more about, you know, making money off rights. And even then, they were just so tight-fisted about controlling those. And I think it's contributed to, you know, Godzilla eclipsing Kong. It's not like Toho's been, you know, generous, but I mean, frankly, I'm amazed in some respects they allowed is it Legacy or Legend Pictures?
Oh, Legendary.
Yeah, Legendary. Thank you. Yeah, Legendary Pictures to do it after the Pig's Breakfast of the '98 movie. After that, if I was trying to be like, no, thank you. We'll just, you know, we'll make Godzilla a Japanese only thing from now on. Thank you. But they did, and I think it's a phenomenon to where now, you know, like I said, it's, you know, Kong riding Godzilla's coattails, so to speak. So
that's really cool. The returning the favor thing. I like that.
I've noticed that with both films, they start off with King Kong and Godzilla just already existing in this world, which I found notable and interesting because I haven't seen either of these films before, given this, you know, before the preparation for the podcast. I assume these stories were going to be like at least one exists in the world, and then we're going to go on a journey of discovery to find out, oh, there's another big like creature living amongst us as well. And I think I found that to be notable. Like they cut the fat really quickly with both of these films. Like in the 1963 version, you have the submarine, you have Godzilla, you have the boss. Like they're stealing our spotlight. You know, everybody's trying to watch like news on Godzilla. And then they mention they fly by mention Kong on that island with the berries, and he's like, yeah, I might as well go check him out. So it's like they're in this world, they're already aware that there are creatures and there's the possibility of more creatures. And in the 2021 Godzilla versus Kong, you have Godzilla. I could be off on the sequences, on the order of them, but you have Godzilla already existing because he's the reason Apex exists, and he's already destroying like buildings and stuff. And then you cut to King Kong enclosed in this like dome, this biodome. So and that's within like the first 10 minutes of the movie. So they want you to know off the bat that these characters exist. They already exist, already established in these worlds. So now let's get going. Let's cut the fat. Let's get down to what you came here to see. It's them getting in a conflict.
I think that's a good note because that's where the suspension of disbelief really works. Because, I mean, of course, they've done all these movies leading up to it, and I don't know the movies leading up to the 1962 one, but they just assume you know that, and it works, and you just go with it from there. So
it's also interesting to think about the differences in terms of the commentaries, and this is one of the reasons why I love franchises. And Godzilla is the longest-standing franchise in film.
Yeah,
James Bond doesn't take off for another decade. They're older franchises, but they kind of go by the wayside. But Godzilla is basically since 1954, they've been turning out Godzilla movies pretty steadily. And each one of them is very much a product of its time. Godzilla versus Hedorah in 1971 is about Japan dealing with pollution. Godzilla versus King Ghidorah in the early 1990s is about, you know, the West and Japan and the anxieties there, and so on and so forth. King Kong versus Godzilla, as I was saying, they make this very sly commentary about television and its annoyances, and that's the kind of thing they can't really do in the 21 film because it's kind of like the scale is just off for that. But they can make a commentary about the hubris of billionaires and how they think that technology is going to fix everything. I mean, Walter Simmons can be, in that sense, very much like an Elon Musk style character who is, you know, if he throws enough money at it and builds a gigantic enough Cybertruck that he's going to, you know, reassert man's dominance. And of course, by men, he means in particular him, and how this commentary of that is not necessarily the best idea. That gets to that environmental theme that you've that they really played up in the second movie as well. Which, again, huge issues in the second movie, but they did continue that theme of, okay, it's about environmental balance and about the Titans are there because we've screwed up and they're going to help us fix things, and how maybe we should just let nature play itself out rather than constantly, trying to think that we can one up it, because when we try to do so, it inevitably turns out worse. Hence, Ghidorah taking over Godzilla and killing Simmons.
In other words, let them fight.
Excellent point. Yeah, I guess it does go all the way back to that first movie.
Yeah.
So
other things, these are just really surface level things that I saw, was the huge technology, like these big engineering feats that they had to do in both of them. I guess the entrance to the Hollow Earth and the Mechagodzilla, I guess, would count as one of them.
I have to say that's one of the questions I kept asking myself as I'm watching the movies. Where are they getting money for this?
Yeah, for sure.
In King Kong, it makes sense. There's these two kaiju. We've got to throw money into building this gigantic pit. We got to power it up. But that's kind of like straightforward stuff. It's like, okay, so is Simmons like? It would have been nice if they had some sort of scene where Simmons is like going for the stockholders, like, okay, you've got like $20 billion you're sending to this thing in Hong Kong, and this hyper loop that you've built. Where exactly does that go? How are we making money off this?
Yeah.
And then he gasses them or something like, maniacal supervillains tend to do in these movies. So.
Yeah, and then there's the Titans. I don't know where the term kaiju comes from, because it's not said on the other one, but that's kind of the term for giant monsters in Japanese movies. But they call them the Titans in the American ones. Then Kong on balloons. The shot of him waking up in there, I'm like, oh no, that would have been a great suspense thing too, when he wakes up. But they kind of, I don't know if they intentionally play it for laughs, but he's like just a baby that woke up from his nap type thing.
Well, they do, because they were consciously trying to make the Godzilla franchise an all ages franchise.
Yeah.
And you don't get that in the first two movies. First two movies are very grim for the 1950s. I mean, it's about loss and suffering, and you're not going to get the 7-year-olds, getting their parents to go see it with that. But if you make it funnier, if you have, Kong getting groggy and passing out, that's kind of a slapsticky thing.
And then in Godzilla versus Kong, similar to the balloons, they've got the net that has all these helicopters, and I'm like, it doesn't matter how many helicopters you have, it's not going to be able to carry that thing. But, I don't know.
What gets me is, going back to what you're saying about the scale, is that it's interesting how both films minimize the casualties. I mean, you look at what happens.
Yeah.
I first thought about it during the battle scene in GVK, where they, they're slicing up these ships. There are literally thousands of sailors dying. When Godzilla nukes the carrier, that's a good, probably 2,000 people killed. And yet you don't see a single body. You see the ships. The bodies basically you see are the ships. It's, you see them sinking. It's very nicely done. But you don't get a sense as to the loss, because, of course, these are not supposed to be the bad guys.
Yeah. You're going to lose your popcorn entertainment when you start showing all the people dying.
Exactly.
It would be like doing Pearl Harbor and Godzilla versus Kong at the same time. Massive tonal problems if you were to do that. That would have scoliosis. The two spines would crush together and it would not work.
Another similarity I've noticed on both films is that they both set of characters, both stories, relied a lot on Kong saving the day. Like us as like audience members and people who are already familiar with Kong, we know that he is inherently not a bad guy. He's just an animal, and he always just wants to go home. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And in these movies, the human characters, they throw Kong into these situations and expect him to fix.
Yeah, into their machinations.
Yeah, and expect him to understand and fix the situations. And he does. Like he understands the situation and eventually like makes it better for the world, for the human characters. But that's something that I noticed that and I imagine that'll probably be something hard to do, because it's going to be hard for them to communicate. Godzilla versus Kong at least tried with the Gia character, but that is something I noticed in both films. They kind of just throw Kong, but at the same time, if you throw an animal against another animal, their instincts would be to like fight, or like, you know. Maybe
that's why I don't like the humans as much in these movies. The monsters are more simple in that way. So
and that's where you get the key contrast, which is that while Kong is performing the same basic function in both movies, he's the protagonist, he's helping out the humans. Godzilla's position is very much changed. They do a bit of a head fake in GVK, but in King Kong versus Godzilla, that's the point in the franchise where Godzilla is still the villain. He's actually the villain in the next movie too. He doesn't actually become the hero of Japan until King Ghidorah. So, whereas in the GVK, they have to get around that a bit because they've already established in the previous two films that Godzilla is supposed to be a good guy. So how do you now suddenly make him an antagonist so as to make it less about, how do you in effect create the conditions to where we're supposed to root for Kong over Godzilla? And that's where you get the, why is he attacking? Has Godzilla somehow turned type of thing? So,
yeah.
Okay, and with that, we'll go to our star ratings. Okay, Mark, what was your rating for King Kong versus Godzilla 1962?
For 1962, I'd have to give it 4 stars, which is not a rating I was expecting to give it. But I just, as I watched it and I appreciated it, I saw how much better of a movie it was than the American version with which I was familiar. And it really won me over. I can see why it was as popular as it was, and I can see why it is that it really is a film that I feel like we should bury the American version and just promote the Japanese version, especially in this day and age. It's frustrating how it's still the harder version to come by. We can now, but I was reading a book about Godzilla and the person was saying, it's a shame that that Americans will never be able to see the Japanese version. Well, that's no longer true, thankfully.
And trying to look them both up, they're both kind of buried. But yeah. Okay, Karina, what's your rating?
On the first film?
Yeah.
I would have to give it out of 5 stars, 2.5.
Okay.
So it's a solid 50-50. It's not exactly a movie that you would have playing on the background while you do things. It is something that you have to sit down and watch for you to appreciate. And it does have it has its charms considering the time that it came out.
Yeah.
There is something charming about this, like the slight stop motions and the manipulation of perspective and like the effects. It's so creative. It's so one thing I like about watching older films that it really truly it makes you believe that you can make movies. I mean, anybody can make movies, but like watching older films, it's based on what we have today. Watching older films like this really makes me believe I can make that because they made it because we have more things now. And they're always a joy watching. You're literally watching history. You can see at what point in history like filmmaking was when you watch these movies. But for me personally, because I am like a screenwriter, I think the story wasn't strong enough. The movie is selling you on the fight.
Yeah.
But I couldn't connect too much with the characters. But again, it's not their movie. It's Kong and Godzilla's movie. It just, I feel like it kind of dragged a little bit. I feel like, I don't know. And again, I'm 27. I could be biased. I only grew up on modern movies, you know, so perhaps something like that won't click to me now, or maybe it'll click later on. Or if I take a month just watching like older films, perhaps I'll come back to it and have more of an appreciation for it. But it just it was kind of a
2.5 experience.
It was a 2.5 experience.
Okay.
It has its good, it has its bad. It's was still an experience that I can see myself telling other people about.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I probably won't watch it for fun. You know what I mean? It definitely felt like an assignment. However, it does make me want to check out the other King Kong films and the other Godzilla films.
Cool.
You know?
Okay, so my rating, my experience with it is, I'm going to kind of be the in between you guys. Experience-wise, 4. Like, I just had the best time watching this. The words that, if you look at my notes, it just keeps saying blah, 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 fun, or giant octopus. Oh my gosh. If I were to examine it on a screenwriting level, I'd probably go more your route. But I think it is, I won't be watching it anytime soon, but I'm glad I watched it. Like, that's the biggest takeaway that is similar to you, Karina. I'm glad I watched it. So 4 stars for me. Okay, then let's do our star ratings for Godzilla vs. Kong 2021. Mark. Well,
you know that I have a personal prohibition against doing half stars. So this Godzilla vs. Kong would probably be like 2.5 stars for me. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where the more we talked about it, the more you guys were talking me down in terms of star rating. It's like so many of those films where it's like the more you see the seams, the more you're like, ugh. But I really try to push myself off that fence, and I find that at the end of the day, I still have to give it 3 stars because I still enjoyed the movie. The spectacle was amazing. You really can't fault the acting. It's fascinating. We're at a day and age where the acting is not the biggest issue with a movie where people are literally acting against pixels. And I don't know if that's because they're preparing for it better nowadays, or if they're able to adjust the technology better to where they make the interactions look more seamless. But I just thought that, the flaws that existed in it were not traceable to the acting. Even like Brian Tyree Henry, we'll take Bernie as a product of that's what he was told to do. So acting, spectacle, the fight scenes were great. It's the flaws that prevent it from being anything higher than a 3. But I gotta say, at the end of the day, this is a film I rewatched parts of it after I was done with my preparations, and I've said, this is enjoyable. Now I'm contemplating maybe I should make sure I have access to it at some point so I can rewatch it in the future. So 3 stars for me.
Cool. Okay, Karina.
I think I would also give it 3 stars. And again, I'm like, I don't want to give it 3 stars. But I did find myself enjoying it just a little bit more than the 1963 version. And again, I think that comes from my age and the films that I grew up with. Like, I grew up with like 2009's Avatar and King Kong 2025. Yeah. So believability is like everything to me. When I watch the 1963 version, I feel like I'm watching people play with toys. So I have to rely on the story. And just the story wasn't strong enough for the 1963 version, even though I like it for what it is and I found it fun. For this one, again, based on like my history and the baseline that I just set, I give it a 3 because it was still... I enjoyed it a little bit more than the 1963 version, despite how dumb it can be, how stupid. You just want to grab it by its shoulders and be like, what the hell is that? But I did like it. It was a good King Kong and Godzilla movie. I liked King Kong was a fleshed out character in this. Like he wasn't just like an animal, and you're not watching like a kind of like a movie like a movie about like an animal or like a dog. I feel like there are more movies about a dog, so I'll talk about that. Like a dog trying to find its way home, because we can sympathize with animals more. But this one, he felt more humanized, more anthropomorphic. Yeah, and I think because of that, they spent time to flesh him out more. They gave him like a background and a want that's different from like he just wants to go home. Like he wants he does want to go home, but he wants a family as well. He wants he's just more fleshed out. The fight scenes were really good in this one. The CGI was great. There are shots in this film that were beautiful, that were really good. The action shots were great. The shot where Kong's hand like just slaps onto like the vessel and he climbs on, and then there's another shot where Godzilla just like he also has one of those shots where his hand drops down on the vessel and he climbs on. Like those shots were great. Like when I'm watching a big budget film, I want shots like that. Yeah. Because you could only achieve shots like that with a big budget film. However, I have not seen Godzilla -1, so I could be speaking out of my ass here. But
get ready to be pleasantly surprised. I don't want to oversell it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I can't wait, honestly. This is something where like I could have it playing in the background and then I'll see a scene that I like and it'll make me sit down and like watch it. It's cool. It's a cool movie. It's not great, but it's cool.
Yeah, it's interesting you say cool because fun was the word that came for the other one. This one, cool, was...
This one's cool.
Came for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so my review of this, I'm going to have to join the 3-star club. But I've got different reasons, I guess. This is a movie that knows what it is and does it to the nines. Like, I can forget all the plot stuff because that's all the flying ship and stuff, because that's not what we're here for. That's not what it's about. It's about Godzilla versus Kong, and they deliver like crazy on that at the end. And even that boat scene in the middle, like, you want a nice midpoint for your movie, there's a good example. So for me, 3 stars is usually a movie that I'd rewatch over and over. This one, I don't know if that kind of breaks my rule. I'd probably rewatch the fight scenes. It's great for that. Like you said, having it in the background. If I get a craving for this, I'll probably just look up Godzilla versus Kong and fight scene and watch it on YouTube. But yeah, very enjoyable movie. And you can learn a lot of things from its flaws too. So yeah. I love that about bad movies. Well, not to call this a bad movie, but it knows what it is and it does it great. So
that's fair.
The most instructional movies are the flawed movies, because the flaws tell you what was missing, what film needs, and points out what films should have when you're making your own.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. That was a monster episode. I think this is our longest one. We're either 3 hours or coming up on 3 hours. So depending on how much I edit this. And that leads right into my next thing. If you'd like to get access to bonus features and deleted clips from Criss Cross and our sister show, Facets of Story, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Transcend Entertainment. That's TRANSCEND Entertainment. And our next episode will be The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and Unforgiven. And we're going to have a very special guest on this one, Phil Staley. He's actually a cowboy reenactor, and I have him in one of my films. So that'll be an awesome episode.
Looking forward to meeting him.
Yeah. That's it for today's Criss Cross Cinema Podcast.
But you wouldn't clap yet, because making something disappear isn't enough. You have to bring it back.
Criss Cross.